Hi there. Hi, world. I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Emily.
And this is A Trial by Podcast. Welcome back to the pod, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. So, just a little update for you guys. This is the first episode that we're recording since we launched the podcast.
We're live, baby.
We're live, baby. You probably heard us talk about the launch in like other episodes, but that's just because I recut in an intro because I'm like, oh, we need to thank everybody when episode 2 comes out and whatever. So, or episode 3 comes out. So, that's why you've heard us talk about it. But really, this is the first time that we're recording since we launched it. And
thank you to everyone.
yeah, thanks again to everybody. We had a lot more listeners like the first 5 days or so since we launched than we expected. We thought it was going to be like 30 people that, we know. And we're
like friends,
listen.
family, and relatives.
Yeah, but it was, I think, the first 5 days, so Tuesday to Saturday, is that 5 days? Yeah. We had 122 listeners. So
4 days.
I'm marking that here publicly so we can like compare once we get to this episode and this comes out, like how many we've had. But we really appreciate you guys listening. If you like the podcast, make sure whatever you're listening on, if you can give us a 5-star rating, that helps us with the algorithm. It just shows them that, our listeners like are interacting with the podcast and like genuinely like it. So giving us a 5-star rating is great. It's kind of hard to find on Spotify. So if you are on Spotify, go to our like profile page, not an episode page, and you'll see 3 little dots that'll come up with some options, and you'll be able to rate the show there.
You have to be on mobile too. It won't let you rate it on desktop Spotify.
Oh, okay. Good to know. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I tried to the other day and it was like, move to mobile.
Okay. So do it on the app. 5 stars would be great if you love the
5
pod.
stars.
We would appreciate that.
Give us a good 5 stars.
A good 5 stars. What else was I going to say? I was going to say something else about what I want them to do. I'm giving you guys homework. I don't remember.
I thought we were just following. They were just going to follow us.
Yeah, follow us. I said
Interact.
that.
Let us know what.
5 stars. Something about the algorithm. Oh, I remember. Okay. Another thing you can do if you like the pod that just, again, helps us with the algorithm is while you're listening, if you scroll down, at least this is on Spotify only. Sorry, Apple Podcast people. But on Spotify, if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see like questions or polls or whatever. Putting an answer to those, I try and make them funny to like give you a reason to look at them. But if you answer those, like that again is just like telling the algorithm that you're interacting with the pod and you are listening and enjoying. So that would help us with the algorithm as well. So just an overall trigger warning for this episode, and please take this seriously because these are not brief mentions. I am diving very deep into these subjects and we are going to talk about them for extended periods of time. It's not just a 1-sentence mention. So that's why I'm doing it at the top of the episode. But we are going to talk a lot about drug abuse, depression, suicide, and self-harm. A lot. So if those things are very difficult for you to listen to, this is not the episode for you. We love you and we'll see you next week. But yeah, trigger warning. Now, if you are struggling with suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts, you can reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by call, by text, by chat at 988. So with that being said, now that we did all of our biz nasty, let's get into the story. So today,
into it, yeah.
I am going to tell you about the alleged curse of the Von Erich family.
Oh.
Have you heard of the Von Erich family before?
Probably. But you know me, my memory is little garbage, so
I love it. It makes you the perfect, like,
that's me.
We're a good duo then.
It's me. I'm the problem.
So if anyone has seen the movie The Iron Claw, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And you're probably like, this is not like a story about murder or anything. And that's why, I think the name of our pod is a little, we're not only doing true crime here, guys. We're doing mostly true crime. Don't worry. But every once in a while.
Toes.
Yes. Every once in a while, we are just going to throw in some like very intriguing and unsettling stories. So this is one of those. I think this is definitely falls under the unsettling category.
This is our first one too, right? Is this our first unsettling story?
I think so.
I think so too.
Yeah, I obviously some of them are like both.
Yeah.
But I think this is our first. There's a little bit of crime in here, but it's no one is going to be murdered or anything like that in this story.
I like it.
But I watched The Iron Claw and I was like, this is the most insane shit I've ever seen. This is crazy. And I knew it was based off a true story. So
is it like a scary movie or is it like a thriller?
No. It's not. It's just, I don't know what category you would put it in.
Action? Mystery?
I don't know.
Drama. Okay.
It's a drama. So it's about the Von Erich family, who they're like a famous wrestling family. Like I'm talking WWE style wrestling. They actually had their own wrestling network called the WCCW.
Oh, damn.
This was like late 70s, 80s, early 90s was kind of like when they were at their peak.
Okay.
And the Von Erich family is a family, like the parents, and then there's 6 sons.
Damn.
Yes. All boys, like wrestling and
prayers go out to their mother.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, this poor woman, like this is a very like interesting and intriguing story, but it's one of the most tragic stories I've ever seen or heard. And when I watched this movie, because I had never heard about it before, I was like, that is the most tragic thing, one of the most tragic things I've ever seen. And then when you read the real story, it is even worse.
Oh.
Even worse.
Well,
so
we about to fuck around and find out.
Yep. That is what I'm going to tell you about today.
Iron Claw.
So.
Sorry, I'm looking up the movie. Oh, it was Zac Efron's in it. And Jeremy Allen White.
Yeah, you have to watch it. After this, you're going to want to watch it.
I already want to watch it.
Okay, so disclaimer, like really the story of the Von Erich family, their lives are wrestling. Their entire lives are wrestling. That is like what they do, what they love. And if you're going to tell the story of them, I think you should focus on the wrestling because that meant so much to them. Mm-hmm. That's not our topic here, though. I'm going to try and tell some of the wrestling, but it's very like convoluted. There's so many different characters, and I'm going to try and tell you a little bit, but if I tell you too much about wrestling, I don't think it's not for our listener base. That's not what our listener base wants to hear. Mm-hmm. But I recommend, like, if you're into wrestling, definitely, look more into this family. I'm sure
give them a check out.
If you're into wrestling, you already know who they are. You probably already know a lot about them.
Yeah.
So let's start with a man named Jack Barton Adkisson. That is a hard last name to say. So he was born on August 16th, 1929. Now, little is known about Jack's childhood, but we do know that, like, when he was in high school, this is when he met a beautiful girl by the name of Doris Juanita Smith, and the two fell in love. They were married on June 23rd, 1950, when Doris was only 17 years old and Jack was 20.
Damn!
Yep.
I always forget that the, like, legal marrying age then, they did not give a fuck about.
I think my grandma got married when she was 17.
That's crazy.
17 or 18. She had her first baby when she was 17, which I think is why she got married. But it worked out well.
That's okay.
It worked out great for her. So around the time Jack married Doris, he was attending Southern Methodist University in University, Texas, which is, I'm like, what a creative name for the town. Like,
yeah, a university and a university.
What if we named it University, Texas? I like that.
So cool.
So Jack had been an athlete pretty much all of his life. And in college, he played football, he threw discus, and again, star athlete, like peak male athleticism, whatever.
Just the Hercules of dudes.
So after college, he actually almost made it to the NFL, but was cut from the Dallas Texans at the last minute. So instead, he ended up joining the Canadian Football League. So during his time living in Edmonton, playing football there, he met the now famous wrestler Stu Hart. Okay. That name meant nothing to me when I read it.
I was gonna say,
I don't know anything about wrestling.
Cool name.
But this story has made me like so interested in like the lore of wrestling. Like one thing I didn't realize about wrestling is like every episode, like when they're doing it weekly on TV, it's like you can't just watch one episode and like fully know what's going on. Like the storylines continue over the whole season, and like it's all about like, you know, these feuds between different wrestlers and like why they don't like each other.
Dude, this is really weird that we're doing this story right now, because I literally never ever watch wrestling. And last night there was a wrestling something on wrestling, and Logan Paul was fighting, and I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, what is going on here?
But that's not wrestling. It wasn't wrestling.
Yeah, it was wrestling. Yeah.
Oh,
I didn't know he did wrestling
either.
I thought he was
cage fighting.
Yeah, me too. But I guess he's moving on to wrestling now, and I was like, this is interesting. Like, it definitely tells a storyline, and I did not know that. So I was a little lost, but yeah, that's weird that we're doing this case now.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad that you like. I feel like that'll pique your interest in this case.
I'm like, oh, that's cool.
So anyway,
backstory.
Stu Hart is like apparently like an iconic wrestler, okay? Like one of the first like super mainstream iconic wrestlers.
I gotta Google
So
him.
when Hart met Jack, he was just super impressed by Jack's stature because he stood at 6'4" and he weighed over 250 pounds. So this is a big dude and like super athletic. So Stu kind of talks to Jack and he kind of convinces him like, you should go into wrestling. Like, this is a great craft, whatever. And Stu kind of became his, like, mentor in wrestling. And he even booked him on his Klondike wrestling promotion, which is, like, a tour. Like, they go on tour and do shows and whatever. Nice. And so after just a little bit of training Jack, like, he takes him on this tour with him and really, like, starts his career off.
Nice.
Now, Jack was paired up with another new wrestler who was named Walter Sieber, and the pair were marketed as the evil Von Erich brothers, a pair of angry Prussian Nazis. So
damn.
Yeah, I know.
Jeez.
And I'm going to kind of get into why they go with the Nazi angle, because you're like, But anyway, so Walter's character went by Waldo Von Erich, and Jack became the infamous Fritz Von Erich. So in the beginning, when I'm talking about the Von Erich brothers and whatever, that's not their real name. They are the Atkinson family. But, you know, they talk about later, and I'll get to some quotes from some of the brothers. They're like, we were born as like the Atkinsons, but we became the Von Erichs. Like our personality and like who we are, like at
method
our core,
acting,
was like the Von Erichs. And it's really interesting. Like that's how much it meant to them. So in his book titled The Squared Circle, Life, Death, and Professional Wrestling, David Shoemaker wrote, quote, "Like so many tropes in the wrestling world, the Nazism was a lie told to advance a greater truth about the existence of evil in the world and the need to overcome it with headlocks and such," end quote. So, like, all of these storylines...
So punk rock.
Yes. Like,
with headlocks.
So they, you know, the reason that they were, like, their trope was Nazism was because they were like the representation of evil. Mm-hmm. So they were the bad guys, they were evil, and the whole thing was supposed to be like this back and forth battle between good and evil, and eventually the good guys were supposed to prevail and like take them down. So
boring.
So
cliche.
At this point, like, with this trope, his wrestling career, Fritz's wrestling career, was really starting to take off. Now, around the same time that his career was taking off, so was his family. So in 1952, which was just 2 years after he married Doris, she gave birth to their first child, which was Jack Jr. Now, just 5 years later, in 1957, they had another son named Kevin, and a year after Kevin, they had a third son named David. So
Poor
boom, boom,
Doris. Oh my God.
boom. Or
Give
bless
Doris a break.
Maybe I'm sure she was
Riding the baby wave, man.
Yeah,
For 3 years.
And remember,
no, 4 years. Was it 4 years?
From 1952 to 1950, 5 years.
Oh,
So, and remember, that's the first 3. There's 6 coming.
yeah.
Now,
Sheesh.
by the late 1950s, Fritz was spending a lot of time on the road trying to build his career. The family, even though he was kind of taking off in the wrestling world, like the wrestling world was very niche. We didn't have everything on TV. It wasn't national. So really the only way to make money was these tours. So the family didn't have a lot of money at all at this time. And Jack has to be on the road. That's the only way he can really provide for them at this point.
Well, yeah, they're trying to feed 8 people or 7
Well,
dudes.
at this point, they only have 3. They only have 3 little boys. So all this touring took him to Cleveland, actually,
Ayo.
in 1959 for a wrestling match. So Doris stayed home, of course, in Niagara Falls, New York, where she lived, to take care of the 3 boys while Fritz was on the road. Sadly, while he was gone, the couple's oldest son, Jack Jr., was walking home from school back to the family's trailer home. And it's believed that as he was walking, he was just kind of strolling, and he puts one of his hands out and he's just kind of running his hand alongside one of the neighbor's trailers, like a kid does.
Yeah,
Have you
they
ever
do on a
that
fence.
to a bush or
yeah,
something?
or like a fence or something. You just run down it, yeah.
So he's running his hand along the trailer, but what he didn't know was there was a shorted wire. So once he got to a certain metal part of the trailer, it shocked the boy, knocking him completely unconscious into the ground.
Oh my God.
The 6-year-old, walking home alone, fell forward onto the ground unconscious, with his face landing in a puddle of melted snow, where he drowned in the puddle.
How the fuck? Oh.
Yeah. Isn't that horrible?
Dude, that sounds like a voodoo story. Like somebody
Well,
have a
this is
voodoo
where
doll or something.
People talk about the curse of the Von Erich family, and
Oh,
it's
yeah, dude.
one of those things where, the fact that it wasn't even the electric shock that killed him,
Yeah, that's
but
what's
it was
wild.
drowning in a puddle of snow is crazy,
Dude.
and just horrible. As
The
a parent,
Reaper was coming for him. That sounds like some Final Destination shit.
yeah, it's so sad. And
he
Fritz
was
later
6.
told.
Poor guy.
Fritz later did an interview with Texas Monthly Magazine where he told them, quote, "I just started blaming the entire wrestling business for the death of my oldest boy. I started to look forward to climbing back into the squared circle and going after one of those guys who I held personally responsible for all of my bad luck. I got such a bad reputation for being overly aggressive in the ring that some wrestlers even turned down matches with me," end quote.
Aw, he was just like, because that's such a tragedy. And he's like, I need somebody to blame.
Right.
That's so sad.
Because he was just gone,
Yeah, he's like, I was gone having to work for this wrestling thing, and that they are the reason
for his
why.
family,
Yeah, and they're like, and then my son died, so who else can I blame?
Yeah.
That's so sad.
And so the reason that the movie about this family is called the Iron Claw is because that was their finishing wrestling move was the Iron Claw. And basically it was they would take one hand and cover their opponent's face, kind of where their eyes are with their hand, and just push them down and squeeze so hard that they couldn't take it anymore.
Damn.
And people started to say, there were stories that I read about people didn't want to go against Fritz because he would
They were afraid of the Iron
he
Claw.
would actually hurt them with the Iron Claw. And obviously we all know wrestling is,
Dramatized.
of course it hurts when people are slamming you into the ground and stuff, but you're supposed to work together to make it less painful.
Yeah.
And Fritz was not doing that. He was really taking
He
all
was
of
just
his
going
anger out
0 to
on
100.
people, which is part of you're not saying he should have been doing that, but you kind of understand your son dies.
Yeah, I get why. He's had a lot of rage, and that's a perfect place to release it, I guess. But that sucks for the other people.
Yeah. So in regards to the death of Jack Jr., Doris is quoted as saying, quote, after you lose the first one, there's that nagging fear that you'll lose another. You not only believe it can happen to you, but you know it's going to almost. End quote.
Oh God, that's chilly.
And yeah, and I'm like, what a horrible like way to live.
Yeah.
To just be so fearful that this is going to happen again, but you completely understand. Like, of course you would feel like that.
Yeah, I see where she's
It's the
coming
worst
from.
thing that's ever happened to you, and you never want that to happen again. Now, in 1960, less than a year after the death of Jack Jr., Doris gave birth to the couple's fourth son, Carrie, followed by their fifth son, Michael, in 1964, and their youngest son, Chris, in 1969. In total, the couple had 6 sons, Jack Jr., who had passed away, followed by Kevin, David, Carrie, Michael, and Chris, in that order. Growing up, the boys were raised as boys. They would go hunting.
They were boys.
They were boys, like the boysiest boys of all
The boysiest
time.
boys.
And they loved it. They loved the way that they grew up. They loved their brothers. And like, they do a great job of portraying it in the movie. Like, these guys really loved each other. And I've watched some interviews with some of the brothers, like talking about each other, and like, they just love each other so much. Like, their family is like everything to them. And it's really like heartwarming and sweet. But they would go hunting and fishing with their father regularly. Sometimes friends and family would join them, and they'd end up hunting with a group of over 20 people. And I read this article from D Magazine titled "The Fall of the House of Von Erich," and the writer Steve Hollingsworth, he described their childhood in just like the best way that like really helps you picture how they grew up.
Yeah.
So he said, quote, "Growing up, the Von Erich boys had the kind of charmed country existence that people have in mind when they talk about the way life used to be. The kids romped through the woods. They had 8 Labrador retrievers. They drank 32 gallons of milk a week.
Oh my God.
Yeah. They once set fire to a field trying to kill one mouse and covered speed limit signs on the farm to market highways with mud. Whenever the boys got out of hand, Fritz dealt out quick, painful justice with one of the leather straps hanging in the closet." End quote. And
that was the way they used to do it. I mean,
yeah, like
it sounds like they just had the most wholesome upbringing, I guess.
Yeah, like you can picture it, like how you've seen in movies, like they
white picket fence and like all of that stuff, you know?
Right. Like later on, once the family starts to get more money, they end up relocating to Texas. So they grow up on this huge ranch in Texas, and it's just one of those, this is 70s, 80s. So remember, like, no phones, no computers. Like, they have one TV in the house that has a few channels.
And they're just always outside
and
doing
yeah,
something.
they're just running around, like just 5 boys running around causing ruckus on a farm.
Just mayhem.
And it's like, you can picture that life in your head really well. And like how close they are to each other, because they're really like, those are their best friends or are their brothers.
That reminds me of my dad. He grew up with 3 brothers.
Yeah.
Or 2 brothers.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, and they grew up on a farm.
Oh, really? That's cool. So during Steve Hollingsworth's interview with the Von Erich family, Hollingsworth asked Fritz if he ever thought he was too hard on his kids, to which Fritz responded, quote, "Absolutely hell no. One time Carrie yelled at me that he shouldn't get a beating, so I tore his butt off even harder," end quote.
Ouch.
So Fritz was definitely like a physical disciplinarian. He was very hard on his kids, very strict. But that's the way that they were raised.
Yeah, that's kind of how it was back then too. I feel like a lot of families were like very strict on their kids.
Especially with boys, he was like one of those dads that like,
he's like,
raising them to be men, like does not fuck around. So Fritz even turned the barn on the family's ranch into like a weight room where each boy was christened with their first weightlifting workout as soon as they hit puberty. He was
a training facility.
"We're getting in the gym. Like, your balls have dropped. It's time to go. Like, no more fucking around."
You're 16, get in there.
Yeah. So it said that the boys and Fritz would work out for up to 3 hours a day in the weightlifting room on top of their sports schedule. So
and you already know they're going hard as fuck.
Oh, they played all these sports and then they're going home.
You're like, oh, yep. What are you guys doing tonight? You want to come over and they didn't have video games back then, but like, I don't know, kick some rocks. Nah, we gotta go work out.
Yeah, we gotta go pump some fucking iron.
Yeah,
dude.
we gotta go get
and
fit.
if you see pictures of them, like even as
I'm sure they
teenagers,
were fucking
they're
Arnold
like
Schwarzeneggers.
oh, so fit, so fit. But the workouts like weren't always as simple as just like lifting weights. Like they did a lot of that, but Fritz would also kind of put them into these like crazy testing scenarios. So one family friend told People magazine, quote, Fritz would tie them together by their feet, hang them from a beam in the barn, and have them fight upside down, end quote.
Damn. He got creative with that.
Right? Like they're just like, he's like, okay, just battle royale.
Like, how else
hanging.
can I test them?
Yeah, like why upside down? How does that help your fighting skills? Like,
Probably because your like blood all goes to your head. Dude, did you see that off topic? Did you see that like roller coaster ride type thing? It was like the swinging one that got stuck
upside down
for half an hour.
Yeah,
They were
that's
stuck up there.
terrifying.
You could die from being upside down for that long.
don't you remember when the corn festival one people got stuck upside down?
Oh, no,
I was
don't
there when
remember
that happened.
Nothing.
But we knew.
That's why I don't go on those rides.
Yeah.
I don't like the swinging rides,
No, they freaked me out.
especially the ones that are at the like festivals that they just like
Set
fold
up and
up.
tear down. No.
Yeah, no.
I agree.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. So
That's dangerous. All your blood runs to your head.
yeah. So Kevin told D Magazine that as kids, the boys would often go up to other kids and nicely ask them if they wanted to fight. He explained, quote, not because we were picking on them, but because we thought it was the natural thing to do.
They're just
end
like,
quote.
I want a challenge, and I've already fought my brothers every day for my entire life. So like,
right. So
give me something new.
It sounds like that's like what they did was for fun
Yeah.
was just
They're like,
fight
"Hey,
each
you
other.
wanna fight?"
Like yeah. Like when the way he said it, like we would politely ask them if they wanted to fight. It's like,
Dude,
well, who would want to fight? But
that's what I'm
how
saying.
they were raised, you know?
If they came up to me, I'd be like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah. Now, Kevin was probably unsurprisingly an incredible football player. He played in college as a fullback at North Texas State University, and he even had prospects of joining the NFL until a major knee injury virtually ended his football career completely.
Damn.
As soon as he recovered from this knee injury, like enough to be involved in any sort of athletic endeavors again, he went straight into wrestling, into the same career that Fritz was in.
Yeah.
So, and remember, like at this point, Kevin, because Jack Jr. passed away, Kevin's the oldest son at this point. Now, David, who was just a year younger than Kevin, was both a star basketball player and a star football player in high school and was rewarded a scholarship to play both sports at North Texas State, which is the same college that Kevin was going to where he played football. So they played together for a bit, but David did end up dropping out of college to pursue his wrestling career with his brother and his dad.
Nice.
Now, David also, I just thought this was interesting. Like, he also loved horses. Like, they grew up on a ranch. They had horses. He loved horses. That was, like, one of his passions. And he actually, like, later on, this family, like I've said already, they became, like, one of the biggest wrestling families of all time. But, you know, like David had his own passions on the side, and he actually like went on to raise and sell horses for show and like kind of made his own fortune just in the horse
That's so fun.
industry, I guess.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was super interesting. Now, Carrie, who was 3 years younger than David, he preferred track and field over football or basketball. Now, in high school, Fritz would train Carrie in discus throwing, which is like you throw a discus.
It's like a heavy ass frisbee, pretty much.
Yeah. I probably should have gotten more detail on exactly. Yeah. But you can picture it. Throwing the
pretty much
disc,
what it is.
okay? So Fritz would train him for 2 hours a day, and Fritz actually he played or he threw discus. I think that's what you would say. You don't say played discus.
They whip the fuck out of that discus.
I don't know anything about sports. This is why like my boyfriend talks to me and I just like look at him with a blank stare. I'm like, I don't know what you're saying. But Yeah, so Fritz threw discus when he was like in high school and college and stuff, so he like loved it too. And so he would train Carrie for 2 hours a day. And apparently all of this hard work paid off as Carrie's discus throw broke records before he even graduated high school. And as soon as he
did.
Yep. And even better, as soon as he graduated, he went straight into training for the 1980 Summer Olympics in Moscow.
Fuck yeah. Kevin? This was Kevin?
This is Carrie.
Oh, Carrie.
So Carrie's the third oldest at this point.
Carrie, Kevin, Michael.
So it's Kevin, David, Carrie, Michael, Chris in that order. So, and that's what I'm trying to like kind of talk about them in age order as we go over like kind of who they were as individuals.
Their whole
and, like,
unit, man.
Right. So sadly, just 5 months before he was set to compete, President Jimmy Carter announced that the U.S. would be boycotting the Olympics that year to protest the Soviet Union's, quote, wrongful invasion of Afghanistan, end quote. Shit. And I'm like, oh, the irony. If they only knew what was to come. But so, like, he had basically spent years training for this and thought his dreams were going to come true. Like, he was going to be an Olympic athlete.
He's like, this is my time.
And then 5 months before, it's just taken away. And yeah, so after like Carrie couldn't go into the Olympics, he went home, went back to Texas, lived at his parents' house, and kind of this is when his like wrestling career, he kind of started wrestling
like, well,
as well.
If I can't discus, I'm gonna wrestle.
Now, because Kevin and David had both been training already, by 1977, they had both made their professional wrestling debuts. Kevin, who stood at 6'2", 235 pounds, was said to be a natural athlete.
God damn.
On top of that, he also had naturally good looks, making him very popular with the ladies.
Oh, I'm sure they're all stunners.
If you see pictures of these guys, they are like, I almost want to just say they're adorable, like, because they're so 70s
they're just
looking.
brothers.
They're so 70s looking that, like, if you saw them now, you would be like, oh, no. But, like, at the time, you can see how they're, like, the ultimate hunks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they remind me of, like, that 70s show for sure. And there's something, like, so sweet about them, like, about their looks. And, like, they have this, like, flowing, like, 70s hair.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, in the early days of Kevin's career, it's said that 70% of his audiences were made up of young girls that were there to see him. And he was dubbed the golden-haired warrior. That was like his nickname in the industry.
Okay, I see it.
And I can't remember honestly where I read this story, but I read something about how like Kevin at first didn't, but like all these girls would come up to him after shows, and like he was so shy, like he's always around boys and his brothers, and like grew up in a small
they were
town.
so socially awkward around girls.
Well, he thought that like I can't remember if he said he thought it was his dad, but like basically he thought one of the other guys was like paying these girls or like telling them to like go up to him, and they were like, no, like we're not
nah,
like
dude,
that's
I'm ugly.
all you.
They're not talking to me.
And
they gotta be paid to be talking to me.
And that's actually how he met his later wife. Was like she came up to him after like a wrestling match.
Did one of my dads or my brother did one of my brothers or my dad pay you to talk to me?
Right.
She's like, no, you're just a cutie.
Yep. So,
oh,
in one of his early matches, I know it's sweet. They're very sweet and like lovable when you really look into like who they are. So, in one of his early matches, a fellow wrestler decided to play a prank on Kevin by hiding his boots before he went on stage, because that's like a wrestling thing. Like wrestlers all wear these like big boots. I don't know why. It's like part of their like outfit, their costume or uniform or whatever you want to call it. So this other wrestler like hides his boots, and so he had to go on stage and wrestle barefoot.
Icon.
So like this became very memorable for people, like you're saying, and that became like Kevin's like iconic thing, was like he was the guy that would wrestle barefoot. That was
jokes on the guy that pranked him.
I know, right? Like it kind of gave him this thing that set him apart, and it just became part of his trope. So Kevin had really established himself in the Dallas area by the late 70s, and in 1978, he and David wrestled in the NWA Texas Tag Team Championship together and won. So this was really like the brothers' first major success in the wrestling industry. And this is when their popularity really started to skyrocket. On Christmas Day of that same year, Kevin moved up the ranks as a solo competitor as well when he beat the infamous Bruiser Brody in the NWA American Heavyweight Championship.
Damn.
Now, while Kevin was like very successful and lusted after by the ladies, and he was very like popular, David still seemed to outshine him as time went on. He was the largest of the Von Erich brothers, and he stood at 6'6", 230 pounds. So this is a big fucking dude.
God.
Big dude. And
it's a whole fucking unit.
Yeah, 100%. So he was known for, like, he had more of a personality. Like, Kevin wasn't as good, like, on the mic. David was, like, better known for his personality.
He was just a natural.
He gave, like, really memorable interviews. And he had this trope that was, like, he has this fiery temper that, like, can't be controlled. And it just comes out. And so he gives these, like, interviews where he's like yelling into the mic and everything.
Yeah, he put on a show for them.
And people are like, whoa, because that's really half of wrestling is like the athleticism of it, but half of it is storytelling.
Yeah.
And that's where David really excelled, was like the storytelling aspect.
He's like, back up, bros, I got this.
Right. So like not only did the fans love him like they loved Kevin, but like the promoters and like kind of the, I don't know really what their title is, but like the overlords who are like deciding like who gets to win and who has to lose and whatever, like they loved David. Like David was their boy. He seemed to be like the breakout star of all the brothers who are now like dabbling in the industry. And he was referred to as the Yellow Rose of Texas. That was his like nickname. I don't know why. I couldn't.
It's an interesting name.
Yeah. Now, he was seen as like a main event act, sitting shoulder to shoulder with iconic wrestlers such as Harley Race and Ric Flair. We'll talk.
I've heard of him.
You've heard of Ric Flair?
Yeah.
Okay, I had too, and like we'll talk more about him in the story. But like for anyone who doesn't know, Ric Flair is like, he's super interesting to me because you're used to seeing wrestlers who are like these huge guys, like very like muscular, like built guys, and Ric Flair is kind of like this thin, still athletic, but like thin guy, and his whole thing is like he has like this flowing hair and like these fancy like glamorous outfits, and like that's his whole thing, is like he wrestles with flair, and I kind of love it. And he is one of the most iconic wrestlers of all time.
Yeah, for sure.
Now
he's still alive too. He's only 75. Damn.
Wow.
For some reason, I thought he'd be older.
So just like it happened for his father, while David's wrestling career was taking off in the late 70s, his personal life was taking off at the same time. So in 1978, he married a woman named Candy L. McLeod. And just 3 months later, on October 19th, the couple's daughter, Natasha, was born.
I love that name.
Yeah, isn't that nice?
Candy McLeod.
Oh, I thought you meant Natasha. I like Candy too.
Yeah, Candy McLeod. I love that.
Yeah. Now, sadly, just 13 weeks after Natasha was born, she passed away from sudden infant death syndrome.
Oh.
Yeah, sad.
So much tragic shit is going on. Like
we haven't even dabbled. We haven't even dabbled. So this caused a lot of tension in the couple's marriage, and just 13 months after they were married, they ended up divorcing in 1980.
Oh, that's sad.
That same year was when Carrie had returned home from Olympics, so like from Olympic training. So 1980, Carrie comes back. And again, like I said before, as expected by the family, he goes straight back to training as a wrestler to join his brothers, Kevin and David, who had been in the industry for a few years at this point. Now, like his brothers, he started his career in NWA Texas, which is like, you know how they have the WWE now? This is like a different wrestling. I don't know if it's just the channel or like it's like major league versus minor league. It's like the different leagues that they have.
Like college football and professional football.
It's like they're playing the same sport, but in a different league against different people.
Okay.
So He started in NWA Texas before joining World Class Championship Wrestling, a company that his family eventually went on to later own. So that's the WCCW that you'll probably hear me talk about later, and I'm just going to say WCCW. But the Von Erich family does go on to own this for a while. Like, they're kind of like titans in this industry for a bit. Now, also in 1980, this is when Kevin married his wife, Pamela J. May. And she's the one that I was telling you, like, he met after a match and whatever.
Yeah.
So
he's like, you don't like me.
Yeah, and the way he, like, talks about his wife, like, he just, like, loves this woman. Like, he's so sweet. Like, loves this woman. So
love that.
In 1982, Kevin, David, and Carrie rose to stardom nationally thanks to their famous feud with the Fabulous Freebirds, which consisted of Michael Hayes, Terry Gordy, and Buddy Roberts, who actually happened to be close friends of the Von Erich family. So they start this like 3 versus 3 feud, which went on for more than 2 years. And like this feud is like, people loved this storyline. This is kind of what rocketed all 6 of them, like just made their careers take off. So like, basically, they posed this rivalry between the 3 Von Erich brothers, who were seen as like, it's funny because we talked about how Fritz was seen as like, he was a Nazi and whatever. Well, the Von Erich brothers, as they were coming up, like they had developed this reputation as like the good old boys of Texas. Like they're sweet, they're Christians, they're like lovable, like they represented good.
So it's Kevin and David, right? Or the Von Erich brothers?
It's Kevin, David, and Carrie now. Now they're like a team of 3. I think they do like solo wrestling matches too, but like this is their big feud. So like I said, they're kind of seen as like the squeaky clean goody two shoes. And then the Fabulous Freebirds were seen as like the rule breaking bad boys. Like they were kind of like the representation of like, it's like good versus bad and who's going to win. Now, in 1983, Mike, who is like next in the age line, he joined his brothers in the ring. Although, unlike his brothers, Mike wasn't exactly like happy about this. He never really wanted to be a wrestler at all. He was more into like art and music and that type of stuff. And
I knew there had to be one of the brothers where that was just like not into it.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. And like he loved music. He loved to play guitar in his free time. And
who's a free spirit.
He just dreamed. Yeah, he was more of a free spirit. He dreamed of being a musician. He wasn't into like all the like working out, pumping iron, like
the dude stuff.
Like he was just more of like a kind of like passionate, emotional guy.
Yeah, just like laid back.
Yeah, and so he was actually really interested because he would always go to his brother's matches and everything, and they're always being recorded for TV, and he kind of got to like watch how the back end of that all worked.
He was interested in like the theatrical part of it.
So he was really interested in like kind of like the logistical things of like airing things on television. And he, when he was younger, like he wanted to be a cameraman. That's what he wanted to do. Is he wanted to work for the WCCW, but he wanted to be a cameraman and like film the matches and stuff like that, because he liked art, he liked music, he liked movies. He was very different from his brothers in that way. And like the family, you know, I didn't read anything that they like actively shoved it down, but it in my opinion, it seems like it was never embraced by the family in any way. Like the family was like,
wrestling or no,
we don't get you.
Yeah,
this is a wrestling family. You're gonna be a wrestler.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, makes you sad for him because he's just kind of like forced to follow in.
It kind of like puts him in a corner, you know, like he doesn't really have anything to relate to them with anymore besides wrestling. And
it puts a lot of pressure on him because, like I said, like at the time they kind of become one of the greatest wrestling families in the world. Yeah. And so to have pressure,
that's harder to stray away from when it's that big. You know?
And to have pressure to live up to that reputation when it's something that you don't necessarily like enjoy very much is like, I can't imagine the pressure.
Doesn't give him any other options.
Yeah, that's like if your parents are doctors and like you want to be an artist and like
and they're like, nope, sorry,
what they want
you're
you to
gonna
live
be a
up
doctor.
To. Yeah. So by 1984, Mike was actually voted Rookie of the Year by a national wrestling magazine, pushing him straight into the spotlight alongside his brothers despite his lack of passion for the sport. At the time, David's personal life, so David is, remember, like the breakout star of all the brothers. Like he is kind of the main event.
He's also, he's the oldest, right? Or is he the second oldest?
He's the second oldest.
Okay.
Yeah, right now, because Jack Jr. passed away, Kevin's the oldest.
But David's
then
the one
David.
that's good at like talking people's ears off, right?
Yeah,
And
he's the
good
one
at, like,
that like he's
portraying
known
stuff.
for like that fiery temper. He's really known as like the personality, the star of the Von Erichs.
He's the personality hire of the family.
So, you know, at the same time when Mike's kind of entering the wrestling industry, David's personal life and his wrestling career are just like at their height. Like he's
off.
doing it. Like he is living the dream kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he at this point was expected to be the next heavyweight champion, which is pretty much like that's like the Olympics of wrestling.
Yeah.
That's the
made
number
it.
one, like whoever the heavyweight champion is, that's like the best person in the world, whatever. So he was newly married at the time and he was feuding with Ric Flair. So like Ric Flair was the current heavyweight champion and they're feuding. So like they're doing these matches and like smack talking each other and all of this stuff. And it's all supposed to lead up to this heavyweight championship, like belt match where David is going to win and win the belt from Ric Flair. And again, like we talked about Ric Flair, like we don't know wrestling, but Emily and I both know his name.
Yeah, so he was big.
He was big. And so this was going to make David just as big. And
I mean,
this,
yeah, even just going up against him makes you pretty like popular, right?
Oh, 100%, 100%. But this was like really, if you're a professional wrestler, being a heavyweight, that's
That's
dream.
the goal.
That is the goal, you know? Now, not that you can't have a successful career without it.
But that's like what everybody wants.
Right, exactly. It's like winning American Idol. Like, you don't want to be in the final three. You want to win. You're like, I don't know why that is the thing that came into my mind.
American Idol.
We're just trying to think like what is something where it's just one person wins. It's like winning the Super Bowl. Yeah, that's a better one.
Hey, Clay Aiken
American
did it.
Idol. What am I talking about?
Hey, you know what?
It's like winning the Super Bowl is when you, yeah. Okay, anyway. Let me stop talking off the dome because it's not going well for me. So by 1984, the Von Erichs also had their own weekly TV show with over 200,000 households in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Keeping up with Von Erichs.
Keeping up with the Von Erichs. No, their TV show was wrestling matches. Like it was like
I'm thinking like reality TV.
No,
They're,
that
like,
I
following
wish.
them around. That would be the coolest.
Dude, once you hear this story, you'd be like, I would pay so much money to see
dude.
what that household was like.
Yeah.
So, sorry, you got me distracted.
Sorry.
Their TV show was only in Texas. Like, this isn't like a national TV show, but it was one of the most popular things in Texas at the time. Like, they had, just in the Dallas-Fort Worth area alone, they had over 200,000 households tuning in every single week.
Damn.
This was like, they were the biggest thing in Texas at the time. They're like the Beatles of Texas is like how people explain it in reports that I've read. And like, so, you know, they're getting stopped on street.
They're
and
famous.
The famous, just like us with our podcast.
We want to be famous.
Now, with all of the attention, the Von Erich family saw an opportunity to leave an impact on their audience. They were seen, like I said, as like the face of good in the good versus evil wrestling feuds. And for this reason, they decided to become born-again Christians. Like, they wanted, like, they were getting this notoriety and this, like, power to, like, influence people, especially young people and kids. And they were already Christians, but like they wanted to like have a major impact, so they become born again Christians. And Kevin later tells D Magazine of this time, quote, "At first, we went into wrestling because it was fun. But when all the attention hit, we realized just how important this could be, not just for our family, but for other people. I'll tell you something. It didn't become a performance anymore. It wasn't an act. We became the Von Erichs. We began to think we were everything they represented. And that is what we are now." End quote.
That's powerful as fuck.
Isn't that?
Yeah.
Because you can see how they're just like,
they're like, oh, we have all this fame. What are we going to do with it? You know, like they're like, well, how can we make a difference?
Yeah. And they're like, so we're posed as the goody two shoes Christian boys. Mm-hmm. Let's be like, that's who we are.
Yeah,
like,
let's do that.
Let's be those people and like, let's make it a positive impact on people. And it,
Let's run with it.
Now, according to the Von Erich family, around this time, like while they're kind of like peaking, and especially David actually fell ill. So this is in late 1983. He was reportedly vomiting blood, but never saw a doctor, telling his family it would, quote, go away.
That's such a dude thing to do. Oh, yeah, I was just like the other day, I was vomiting blood, dude. Yeah, you should probably go to the doctor. No, I'll just drink some water. It'll be fine. I'll sleep it off.
I also could see how that can be a product of how you're raised. Like,
100%.
Like,
oh, for sure. I'm sure his dad was like, you're fine, dude.
Yeah, you
crack
like, you
your
get
chin
hurt.
open. You're fine.
Like, stop crying.
Yeah,
like,
get over it.
Yeah.
It's just a cut.
So, and especially like back then, you know, you don't have computers and stuff. Like, you can't like look up, is vomiting blood bad?
Yeah,
you know, like
there's no Google, there's no TikTok, there's no Pinterest.
like you don't know. Like, I feel like everyone that's kind of common knowledge.
They didn't even have
blood.
Ask Jeeves then.
What is Ask Jeeves?
You don't know what Ask Jeeves is? That was like the 2000s version of like Google. Do you remember Cha-Cha?
No.
It was like text 2242 or 24 something, any question, and it would text you back. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh my fucking
took you way
God,
back, huh?
dude.
That's like AIM times.
Yes, that was like flip phone T9 texting
I honestly
times.
think that Ask Jeeves came before Cha-Cha.
That is, dude, I don't even, I like, you just
that
pulled
was back
something
in the
so,
dome,
from
right?
so deep in my memory.
That was stuck in a crevice. I just nudged it out.
Yeah, but like you could totally see how, you know, I'm sure you're not thinking this is good, but he probably didn't know
The severity of it.
Like
yeah,
that-
he's probably like,
that's like-
it's
yeah.
no big deal.
Now,
Just worked out too hard.
he tells his family basically, I'm fine, it's going to go away. And he was scheduled to wrestle in Japan that February, which I guess was like, and we're going to find out, two huge wrestling places are Japan and Israel.
Interesting.
So random to me. Like, not what
Yeah,
I would have
what is the-
expected.
yeah.
But they go to Japan all the time. And it still is.
I don't think
to
I've
this
ever
day.
seen any.
So he was
Yeah.
supposed to go to Japan in February, and this was like an important step on his path to becoming the heavyweight champion. Like, they're on this tour.
Yeah, another notch in the belt.
He can't, and like I said, wrestling is so much about the storylines.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't just miss a few because then you're out of the story.
Yeah, it's like killing somebody off a show.
Right. And then, or like they're just, you're watching a TV show, they're just gone for four episodes. You're like, what the fuck happened
Yeah,
to that?
where'd they go?
And then they try and stick them back in. You're like, that made no sense.
Exactly.
And,
They're like,
and
where were you for 4 episodes?
so it was like, I think he was worried. If I don't go to Japan, like,
He's like, I'm going to fall off the
I'm
face
not
of the
going to
earth.
get this
Yeah.
heavyweight champion, like everything I've been working for. And he,
People are going to forget
honestly,
about me.
he was probably right.
Yeah.
Now, on top of that personal pressure he was probably putting on himself, like if there was anything that the Von Erichs always did, it was fulfill their commitments, no matter what. Like that was the Von Erich. Oh, you don't feel good? Suck it up. Get on stage.
They're literally the Kardashians of that time period.
I think to a certain extent is like a good work ethic to teach your kids.
Oh,
but
yeah,
not
but not
to
when
the
you're
extent where
throwing
like
up
they're
blood.
hurting themselves.
Yeah, literally.
And throwing up blood and going to Tokyo and whatever. So, of course, just like any of his family would, David flies off to Tokyo despite his illness. And on February 10th, 1984, David died
Oh my God.
alone in his hotel room in Tokyo.
First of all, I want to talk to his parents because when he was saying, oh yeah, I was just throwing up blood, I'm still going to go though. Why did none of them say, yeah, you probably shouldn't. You should probably get that checked out.
Right?
Like, in no
Right?
way should you be going to Tokyo to fight
Like
people
vomiting blood
when you're
and-
vomiting blood.
Because to me, it seems so obvious, like vomiting blood is like internal bleeding of some sort.
Yeah.
But like
Blood's
maybe
supposed to be inside
maybe
your
at the
body.
time it wasn't. Like you have to think they were raised different. Like they lived in a small town, rural area. Like
Well, it's not like you drink Kool-Aid and just throwing that up and it's like, oh, it might be just Kool-Aid. I don't know.
yeah,
You know?
yeah. So I don't know, but I have the same thought. So the death report from the U.S. Embassy in Japan stated that he died from acute enteritis, which is basically inflammation of the intestines that usually just causes vomiting. So, for example, when you have food poisoning, that is enteritis. Like,
Oh, okay.
Like that's just like your intestines and everything are so inflamed that like it causes stuff to come back up. And that's
Okay.
what causes the vomiting. Now, however, like if serious cases are left untreated, it can rupture the intestines, causing internal bleeding and eventually death. And
Jesus.
this is what like the official report states, and this is also like obviously what the Von Erichs believe happened.
Yeah.
Now, despite this official report,
So his intestines erupted before he went to Tokyo, and he still went, and then
he
he's
was
like,
just bleeding internally. Like his.
oh God, that
Imagine-
had to have fucking hurt like a bitch.
That's what I'm saying. He must have been in so much pain.
Yeah, like the
All the
tummy
time.
ache that probably
And then he's wrestling because he's training for this.
I mean, yeah, you're going hard 1,000. Well, but that, I mean, I don't know. They're big ass fucking dudes. Like when you're going that hard all the time, isn't it your adrenaline
I'm
just
sure-
covering everything up?
yeah, I don't know. Like I'm sure they're all in a lot of pain all the time, but like
Yeah,
it's
but
your
they don't
stomach.
notice.
It's a different, it's
Yeah,
not
that's
muscle
true.
pain. It's not joint. It's just like he had to have been
Owie.
in so much pain. Now, despite this official report on the cause of death, rumors spread that David had actually overdosed on drugs. Now, Ric
They
Flair.
always take it there. They always take it there.
Well, here's the thing is like, and I talk about it some in this story, but it's not the main focus. At the time, and this isn't just the Von Erich family, this is how the wrestling industry worked at the time. Obviously, like I said before, the whole point is like these fake stories, someone's supposed to win, and they're supposed to look like they're hurting each other, but they're really supposed to be minimizing that and
Yeah.
like make it look real, but not actually be in it. But it doesn't matter, like it still hurts.
Oh,
them.
yeah.
So these guys are in constant pain, and at the time, it was one of those things where like they're just handing you pills on, like pain pills,
Oh,
like
just on
muscle
pain
relaxers,
pills.
like heavy duty shit that people. I mean, so much like rampant addiction, and like if you read,
Well, I'm sure that's not good for your intestines either. You know.
yeah, oh yeah. And if you read about the wrestling industry, like you'll read so much about like overdoses and like drug abuse and it's like kind of crazy. Now the wrestling industry has like changed a lot because they
Yeah.
do drug testing and things like that. But like steroid use, drug addiction, whatever, massive issues,
Damn.
not just for their family, but for a lot of wrestlers at this time. Now, Ric Flair alleges in his autobiography that David did indeed overdose and that his close friend and fellow wrestler Bruiser Brody removed the evidence of the drugs from the hotel room before calling for help. So he says Bruiser Brody like found him dead. There were drugs out in the hotel room. He takes them away and then calls for help, which
I mean, that could be seen either
I
way,
just
'cause,
feel
like,
like-
what if he was just taking them and didn't overdose?
that's
and they're
what
like,
I was
oh, they're
thinking.
gonna think this is an overdose. Like that's what they thought.
That's what I like. I think they just obviously if you die from internal bleeding, there's not a lot of like outward signs of what happened, and so it makes sense that your natural inclination is that you see drugs, you think he overdosed.
Yeah.
But I don't think that like they did an autopsy and like they said it was enteritis. Like so some people are like, well, he actually died from. I don't think he did. I
Yeah.
think he just was a drug addict and was doing drugs and happened to die from something else.
Yeah.
And he probably was in a lot of pain and was like doing drugs to get rid of the
Well, yeah,
pain.
he's probably taking pain pills because
And-
his fucking intestines ruptured.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. It might be possible that the drugs affected his intestines.
Oh, I'm
in some
sure.
way,
He probably
too,
took
that-
one and then
that
that's
made it
probably what
worse.
happened, yeah.
I don't know. But I don't think it's just like
Yeah, I
just
don't
an
think so either.
overdose. Now, regarding David's death, Fritz told D Magazine, quote, "He told me he didn't feel like going, but he said, 'Dad, when I get there, I'll be okay.' I said, 'David, that's the way it is, son. You've got a contract. Those people over there have sold out a building to see Von Erich.' And he said, 'Dad, I'm going.'" End quote. So, okay, I've read stories where they say David, according to the family, David was vomiting blood, but they don't specify who in the family. So I don't know, like, did he tell, like,
Like,
Fritz
did
is
he
just
tell
saying,
somebody, or did one of his brothers see it?
That's
or
what
like,
I'm saying is like, did he tell his little brother who's a teenager, I threw up blood? Or did he tell Fritz, I don't feel good, I'm throwing up blood? And like Fritz just doesn't want to say that now. I don't know. But it's just interesting.
Fucked
Now,
up either way. He could have been. I hate to
isn't
say
that
he could have been
sad?
alive if he wouldn't have
No.
got it checked out, but like
It's
probably would have.
100% true.
Yeah.
He could have lived. He could have lived. And I'm not saying it's their fault or whatever.
How's Doris doing? Like, is she okay? This is the second kid that's dead.
Doris actually has since passed away from natural causes and everything, but I think Doris had a very, very hard life.
Yeah. Poor Doris.
So, just 3 months after David's death, the family held a memorial wrestling match in his honor at Texas Stadium. But it wasn't just any old wrestling match. It was the heavyweight championship against Ric Flair with 41,000 people in attendance. At this match, Kerry Von Erich, who had stepped in to fill his brother's shoes, beat Ric Flair, winning the Von Erich family their first and only heavyweight championship belt
Shit.
by finishing off Ric Flair with their signature move, the Iron Claw.
Iron Claw.
So this is like Kerry, this
Big
was
win
supposed
for the
to be
fam.
David,
Yeah.
and Kerry filled in and won.
And Carrie's the one that doesn't want to be, or is that, no, that's Michael, sorry.
That's Michael.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
Kerry is like,
Carrie's in it.
after
win
David, it seems that Kerry was like probably the most successful, like, and the most talented behind David. I hate to like compare them all to each other, but I'm just trying to give you like an impression of how the wrestling world talks about them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just, I mean, like, imagine, like,
Like, that was supposed to be your brother.
yeah, and imagine, like, trying to celebrate that and whatever. And eventually, like, I think it was, I should have written this part down, but I believe it was less than a year after he wins the belt, Ric Flair, like, wins it back from him. So I almost think it was one of those things where, like they did it in memory of David to...
Well, yeah, because aren't those all kind of, like, they know who's going to win?
Yes, 100%. So, like, they let Kerry win it to honor David and honor the Von Erich family and, like, their tragedy, but Kerry wasn't enough of a star to like
continue the
keep
legacy.
it. Yeah, and keep it instead of Ric Flair. Like, Ric Flair was just a bigger, like, star.
Damn.
So I didn't actually read that was the reason why anywhere, so I might be wrong about that. That's just my guess.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I don't know. After David's death, Mike was officially tapped in to take his spot, as David and Kerry had been teamed up at the time of his death. So, like, they're like a tag team. They do like 2 versus 2 matches. So they're like, all right, Mike, you're up.
They're battling,
like, and he's having to fill the shoes of his brother, who was the star. He was the best of all the brothers.
Yeah.
And Mike, who isn't as naturally as athletic and doesn't really like...
It's not super interested in it.
Yeah. Now he has these huge shoes to fill. So at just 21 years old...
That's a lot of pressure.
Yep. He's only 21 at the time, and he's thrust into the wrestling scene pretty much full force. And so he's billed at 220 pounds. So, like, when they announce him, when he comes out, they say 220 pounds, standing at whatever. But it's believed that he actually weighed, like, closer to 180 because he's just a smaller guy than his brothers, who were, like, I can't remember, like, 230 or 250 or something.
Yeah. Well, they cared about their fitness. He didn't really care that much about it, you know?
Now, it is alleged that he began to use steroids in an attempt to remedy this problem.
Oh, so maybe he did care that much about it.
Yeah. Now, it's also reported that Mike began to abuse painkillers that he had been prescribed over the years to combat frequent, like, shoulder issues. Like, he just, one shoulder, he constantly had issues. So they're giving him more and more and more drugs. And he's doing steroids.
It's big pharma
like,
for you.
That affects you, like, emotionally and mentally.
Yeah.
Now, less than a year after David's death, Mike was competing in a wrestling tour in Tel Aviv, Israel, which, like I said before, is apparently really big into wrestling.
That's such random places.
I know. Now, during one of his matches there, he badly dislocated that shoulder that he had all the pain in, and it required emergency surgery as soon as he returned back to the U.S.
Ouch.
After his surgery on August 22nd, 1985, it became evident that something was very wrong. Mike had developed a fever of 107 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 42 degrees Celsius.
You can fucking die from those. That's a high up, especially as an adult.
It's bad. It's bad.
Ooh.
So Mike was rushed to the Baylor University Medical Center in Dallas, where doctors found him in critical condition due to toxic shock syndrome.
Oh, what?
Now, toxic shock syndrome, which
my
I'm
mind
going to
immediately went to my tampon instructions.
That's where I was going. That's where I was going with it. So I'm going to call it TSS just because it's hard to say. So TSS is a bacterial infection, and it's very, very rare to develop it from a surgery like this. It's most well known for, like Emily mentioned, for any of the men listening, maybe you don't know this. It's known for like women who, if you forget a tampon, something about tampons and the bacteria that grow, you can get toxic shock syndrome. And there are people who have died from using tampons because of this.
Yep.
Again, like so rare. But that's kind of what it's probably
still
most
in my
known
mind.
for.
Every time I change my tampon, I'm like, oh my God, I need to change my tampon. It's been in too long.
I knew a girl who, in college, who got toxic shock syndrome, and she was in the hospital for like weeks.
Yeah, dude, that's scary.
She was lucky though, because it can get really bad, as we
yeah,
are
you
going
can
to
die.
see in this story.
Oh no.
So with TSS, the bacteria that is growing actually produces strong toxins, which is why it's called toxic shock syndrome. And these toxins travel through your bloodstream, affecting vital organs such as kidneys, liver, and lungs. So like they can completely shut down your organs, and that's how people die from it.
And he got it from his surgery?
From his surgery, like he got an infection from the surgery.
Damn, that's so wild. I've never heard of that.
Yeah,
happening
they
before.
said I read it's extremely rare.
Damn.
So Mike was reportedly in a medically induced comatose state for days, only able to communicate by blinking his eyes. Damn. So during this time, like while he's in the hospital, he lost 50 pounds, and his organs were significantly damaged by not only the bacteria itself, but the fever from the...
Well, that, and I'm sure they're not in the best state anyway from all the meds he was taking, like the pain pills and the steroids.
Yeah.
Probably didn't help him.
Oh, I'm sure not. Now, despite the fact that doctors said that Mike had very little chance of surviving the ordeal, he did. Like, they were telling the parents, like, we don't think he's going to live through the night.
Oh.
But he
Doris,
survived.
my mind, every time you're like,
His poor mother.
A son died. Poor
Your
Doris.
6 baby boys. Like,
she's like, here we go again. Another one.
And it makes you think, like, remember after Jack died, she said, I just thought,
she's like, I know it's going to happen again. That's how I feel every day. God,
it's very, what's the word I'm looking for?
Ironic?
Not ironic. I don't know. So even though they didn't think he had good chances, he did survive. But sadly, it seemed that Mike had suffered significant brain damage, and he was never the same again. His cognitive and his motor skills had both been affected. So, like, after he's released from the hospital, he actually, like, gives this interview. And in the interview, like, you can just tell he is not right in the head. Like,
yeah, he's like not all there.
Not the same as he used to be. He speaks very slowly, and he's stuttering, and he's not understanding questions, and he's like really having to be led by people, and it's just like,
that makes me so sad because he didn't even want to wrestle in the first place, and like now he like cognitive and motor skills are like the top things that you would need and to be artistic, and like that's so sad.
Yes, right? It just gets worse.
Oh, no.
Now, despite the evident brain damage and motor skill issues, Mike did somewhat, like, he recovered a bit. Like, that interview was kind of him at his worst, and he does get a little bit better, though they say he's, again, never the same again. Never, like, fully
he never
who
gets
he
to
was
100%.
before.
Yeah.
Now, despite all this, Mike was back in the ring in no time, with Fritz marketing him and this whole tragedy as the living miracle.
Dude, can we please just talk about, again, how this is the Kardashian family of the 70s? Because is Fritz not Kris Jenner?
Yeah, dude, Fritz, yeah. But he's not as good as Kris Jenner. he's not as good as Chris Jenner, and because even in a business aspect, like we'll see. But yeah, like just exploiting
He's
your
like, oh,
children.
sorry, son, you almost died. Get back to it. Oh, I don't like him.
Yeah, I don't either, and we're gonna talk about it later. We're gonna have an in-depth conversation about Fritz. Oof. So this transparent exploitation of Mike after such a tragedy really rubbed audiences the wrong way.
Thank God.
Ratings,
Thank God somebody was rubbed the wrong way about it.
Right. So the ratings began to drop, and in an attempt to like solve this issue, Fritz actually just brought in like some random guy, and he like gave him a Von Erich name, and he tried to like market this guy as a cousin of the Von Erichs. But at this point, the fans knew the family really well, and they kind of knew this was all bullshit, and they could see like right through why he was doing this and everything.
Yeah, like we're not picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah, and even though they kind of know that like wrestling is fake, this was like too fake for them. They could see right through it, and Fritz's business really started to crumble, like the WCCW and everything. Their ratings were dropping, they were losing money. It was starting to go downhill. Like they had peaked, and now they're really falling.
Just tanking.
Now the pressure of all of this on Mike sent him in like deep into a depression because he felt
that's why I felt so bad. I mean, the pressure, all of that pressure on him to be better, and it's his dad fucking it up because like nothing he could have done would have made that any different. Like it was the timing and the fact that he almost fucking died and then it was just thrown back in there. But they're not okay with it.
I get the impression from like things that Kevin has said about Mike that Mike really felt like the family's like decline and the destruction of the business and whatever, he felt like it was his fault because he couldn't live up to like his brothers.
And his dad's like, oh, let me just get this random fucking dude and make him a cousin. So, because you can't do it, obviously. It's not working for you. Like, fuck, dude.
Yeah. So, like I said, this all sent Mike into a deep depression, and this led Mike to really like, this is where his drug use spiral began. So for his depression, he was prescribed a tranquilizer called Placidil, but he began abusing that too. And he would actually like go to 2 different doctors and have the Placidil like prescribed by both, so he could like take twice as much, and like they didn't know.
It wasn't. I just want to say, Michael, it was not your fault.
Yeah. So in the fall of '85, Mike ended up totaling his car on the highway, yet somehow escaped the accident with minor head injuries. Still, these injuries compounded with the permanent effects from the TSS had Mike spiraling. He was depressed. He was abusing drugs and alcohol, and he began to have violent outbursts. Like,
well, yeah, I'm sure his brain was just a fucking mess. Like,
no, yeah, 100%. So just 6 months after the accident, in May of 1986, Mike was arrested on a drunken disorderly charge. Because, like, Kevin kind of talks about how he became, like, super angry.
Yeah, just, like...
And just, like, rageful and would have these outbursts. And I think he tells a story about how, like, Mike was, like, fighting a parked car one time because he just, like, freaked out.
That's
and
not
he was,
funny,
like,
but that fucking... Could you imagine just seeing somebody try to fight a car?
Yeah, but, like, Kevin was basically saying, like, he just was...
Who's losing it?
Losing it completely.
That's sad. That makes me so sad.
On June 4th, 1986, less than a month after Mike's arrest for the drunken disorderly, Carrie's life actually changed forever. He was out riding his motorcycle barefoot.
Dude.
And I don't want to victim blame, but
dude,
life rule. We're going to learn a lot of lessons from the story of the Von Erich family. First,
wear some fucking shoes.
If you are throwing up blood, go straight to the hospital. Don't go to Tokyo. Don't wrestle. Don't train. Go straight to the hospital. Life lesson number 2 from the Von Erichs. Don't ride a motorcycle barefoot.
Or any kind of cycle.
Yeah.
For that matter.
Yeah.
If you're riding bicycles are different because it's... No. Wear shoes when you're bicycle riding.
Right. Like, because if you fall... Anyway. So he's riding his motorcycle barefoot when he hits a parked police car.
What's he got against parked cars, man?
When he hit the police car, one of his bare feet was somehow caught in the rack of lights on top of the car because he kind of like went up over the car. So as his body fell back to the ground, his right foot was ripped almost completely off his body.
My God. Oh, I don't like that.
Almost completely off his body.
I mean,
don't ride your motorcycle barefoot.
But would that probably have happened if he had shoes on too, though? Probably.
Yeah, maybe.
But like,
yeah, maybe.
Maybe not have been.
But still,
maybe
but
not.
I stand
Wouldn't
by
have.
that.
Maybe it just would have taken his shoe and not his whole foot. You know?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But still, I stand by my statement. Don't ride your motorcycle barefoot. Now, Carrie. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was just thinking about Doris again, man.
Oh, my God.
These boys are
Can you
just...
imagine getting that call? We don't know.
How has she not had a heart attack yet? Or like a fucking stroke from the stress of these children?
Strong woman.
Yeah.
Carrie was then rushed to Baylor University Medical Center, the same hospital where Mike had his surgery and all of that. So at the hospital, the doctors worked for hours trying to fuse Carrie's ankle back together, like trying to save his foot because they thought at first they weren't sure if they were going to be able to save his foot.
Yeah.
Now, at the time of the accident, Carrie is the most popular of the Von Erichs at the time because David has passed away. Carrie was kind of like
into the Shine fame.
So, like, they were able to save his foot, but this like set him back so much because if you can imagine, when your foot is almost
his foot.
Yeah. So
what the fuck?
What
I was thinking that foot's gone, man.
Well,
what the fuck?
Well, yeah. So they were able to save the foot. They were able to save the foot. But as you can imagine, when your foot almost gets ripped off your body, and you have to have like hours and hours and hours of surgery, it's not a quick recovery. It's not like breaking a bone.
Mm-mm.
So he actually was absent from the wrestling scene for 18 months.
Damn.
And this took a major toll on the business that was already not doing well.
Yeah.
Like the Von Erichs family business, the WCCW, like, again, at this point, Carrie's the star. Carrie's the one bringing in all the viewers and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was very, very bad. Now, feeling the pressure, like, just like Mike was, he's feeling the pressure that, like, my family's business, everything we've worked for, everything we've built is crumbling because I'm not in the ring. So he's like feeling very rushed to get back. And so in February of 1987, Carrie returned to the ring to wrestle a man named Brian Adias. I didn't look up how to say it. I'm sorry. We're going to call him Brian.
Don't come for us.
While Brian was forewarned of Carrie's fragile state, they're saying like, oh, like, be careful. He just had the surgery. He knows what's going on.
Yeah.
I
mean, how does he not? It's the Von Erich brothers.
Right. So they were very cautious during this match. But still, Carrie ended up re-injuring the foot, his first match back.
That's gotta hurt so fucking bad.
This time, there was nothing the doctors could do to save it, and Carrie's foot was amputated.
Oh, God,
because
dude.
he rushed back to the ring.
Yeah, probably because his fucking dad was like, you're an atrocity to this family. You got to do something to earn a living. I don't like his dad. I don't like it. I don't like the pressure that he put on his kids.
But I think it's a mix. I think there is pressure from him, but I also think there's pressure that they put on themselves just because that's the way they were. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I think anyone would like feel that pressure, but it's like also as a parent, it is your I mean, Carrie was a grown man at this point, but as a parent, it's your responsibility to like when your kids are making bad decisions to like try and guide them in the right direction.
Yeah, but I'm sure he was like, "Oh, you feel fine? Cool. You only had your foot reattached to your body 18 months ago. No big deal. Go back in there. You'll be fine." Oh.
So, Carrie's foot is gone. Once he recovered from the amputation, Carrie returned to wrestling once again.
What the fuck?
He would wrestle with a prosthetic, like covered by his wrestling boots. Now, no one was ever told by the Von Erich family that Carrie had lost his foot. This was a complete secret in the industry. Like the other wrestlers didn't know. I think a couple people from the WCCW knew, like a few, but it was very hush hush. Do not tell anyone. Like this is a secret. Because they wanted him to be seen as like, you know,
this like big bad dude. Yeah.
Yeah.
Damn. I mean, that is kind of cool though that nobody fucking knew that he didn't have a foot.
So
I mean,
he would cover the prosthetic up with his boots. And he even showered with his boots on in the locker rooms to keep the secret.
Ew.
Now, when his entire boot and his prosthetic foot fell off during a practice round, everyone in the room was shocked. But it wasn't televised because they were practicing before a match. So they're just wrestling.
And his whole ass foot falls off.
Whole ass foot falls off. Imagine the other guy that he's wrestling against.
What did I just do?
Yes. Isn't that fucking crazy?
That's so funny.
Oh my God. Like I was like, dude, imagine the shock. So again, at this point, like now people know.
Could you imagine though? But if he played into that, like, dude, what did you do to my foot?
That's what I would do. That's what I wonder if he did. But like, so now the rest, like the people in that room knew, and I'm sure they started to tell people.
Yeah, the cat's out of the, or I should say the foot's out of the boot.
The foot's out of the boot, the cat's out of the bag, all of that. But so now the wrestling industry, or at least some people in it, know, but they never tell the fans or anything. Like this is not discovered for.
They're like, you don't tell anybody that I have no foot.
It's
you
not.
Keep that to yourself.
Yeah, they discovered this years later, and I'll get to that.
Is this in the movie?
Oh yeah, this is a big thing in the movie because it's like him wrestling at home with his brothers, like trying to get back in the ring after. And can you imagine how bad it hurts to be like.
Wrestling,
like he's like doing these jumps into the ring and stuff, like onto his
with a
feet
prosthetic
and like
foot.
with a prosthetic foot. Like in the movie, they portray it as like he's in so much pain, and I'm sure that that's true.
Yeah.
Now, this was also like obviously, like I'm saying, very painful, and this is when Carrie began to abuse prescription painkillers, spiraling into addiction and a very, very, very deep hole of depression, just like his brother Mike. So with Carrie, the star of the family quickly falling, the pressure on Mike only grew heavier. Because remember, even though Mike's like struggling with all this, he's back.
He's already struggling.
So of this time, Kevin later said, quote, "It was just a nightmare, a damned nightmare. I thought, it's all going. We're all finished. I'd look out and watch Mike trying to wrestle, knowing how badly he felt, and I knew how much he wanted to keep up the family name, and I just couldn't believe how sad it all was."
Oh,
end quote.
Carrie said that?
Kevin said that.
Oh,
Kevin
that's so
said
sad.
Now,
Even he saw it. It's like, that's so sad.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, my poor brother has all this pressure on him. Like,
this whole thing is just like tragic. Now, despite all of this, in late 1986, the Von Erich family announced the, quote, Von Erich Over America tour. Set to take place in 1987, the tour would take the Sons across every major city in America on tour. So, Carrie lost his foot. He's in constant pain. He's abusing painkillers. Mike is like, has literal brain damage, is so depressed, is abusing like the tranquilizers. Kevin seems to be all right so far, but they're like, you know what we need to do? Yeah, but
Kevin's probably like, he has to witness all of this happen, you know?
Oh my God, yeah. And they decide, I don't know whose decision it was. I have a feeling
Probably
I know, but I don't know for sure. But they go, you know what we need to do? We need to focus on this business. We need to get back out there. Let's go on tour across every city in America, because that's what like these people who are majorly struggling need. So before this tour began, on April 11th, 1987, Mike was arrested for drunk driving, possession of a controlled substance, and possession of marijuana. I believe the controlled substance was like the medications but like he wasn't steroids supposed to have them.
Painkillers.
Yeah, like something
probably
that was like
he
a
had to
prescription.
double the dose of them.
Yeah, like I think it was a prescription drug that he didn't have a prescription for, like he bought off somebody or something like that, but I don't know for sure. So after posting a $3,500 bond, Mike seemed to kind of like disappear. The family started to worry after a while. So
Oh, now they're worried. Okay.
yeah, I think, you know, they kind of knew his mindset that he was in. So they go over to his apartment to look for him. Inside, they found a handwritten note for the youngest Von Erich brother, Chris, who we haven't talked like too much about him. And the note was basically just telling him that Chris should have his scuba gear.
Oh, no.
4 days later, Mike's abandoned car was found on a dirt road by the entrance of Pilot Knoll Park in Denton County, Texas. In the front seat, a note was found. It read, quote, "Mom and Dad, I'm in a better place. I'll be watching." End
Oh, that
quote.
just gave me chills. I want to cry.
So search teams were sent to search the woods, and just after 9 a.m. on April 16th, 1987, a cadaver dog led searchers to Mike's body, which was zipped up in a sleeping bag 600 yards away from his car. He was 23 years old. The autopsy concluded that Mike had overdosed on his Placidil 4 days before he was found, so just one day after his arrest.
Damn.
According to his mother, Doris, Mike had come to her just a few days before his suicide, saying that he was scared that in a year or two, something in his body would stop working, and he didn't know what he would do to make a living, like if he couldn't wrestle anymore. Mm-hmm. Doris says she told him not to worry about that the family would always take care of him.
Oh.
So let's just recap.
Dude, all of the fucking pressure that he must have had on him, like, that's so much.
I want to recap because a lot has happened. So we had Jack Jr. pass away at 6 years old. Then we have David has the stomach pain. He's vomiting blood. He goes anyway. He passes away from enteritis, which is
A
preventable.
ruptured intestine.
Then Mike is forced into this. He has this shoulder surgery. He gets this toxic shock syndrome. He literally has brain damage. He gets in a car accident that gave him more head injuries. He has like cognitive and motor skill issues. He still goes back to wrestling. Carrie literally gets in an accident, almost loses his foot. They save it. He goes back one time. He loses the foot. He comes back. He's lying, not telling anyone that he lost the foot. And then Mike commits suicide. So now they've lost three.
I just like, my heart breaks for Mike so much because that's not even what he wanted to do. He was like doing that for his family. Like, that makes me so sad.
And he just couldn't do it anymore.
It was too much for him.
So now
he was just like living this terribly unhappy life and just, oh, that's so sad.
At this point, they've lost 3 of their 6 children. The brothers have lost 3 of their 5 brothers. And it's just a fucking living nightmare.
Just tragedy on tragedy, dude.
A living nightmare. And like, and some people are going to be mad at me for saying this maybe, but I think some of them were avoidable nightmares.
But like, also, how is Doris doing? Because...
Probably not well.
She can't be okay.
Now, the year after Mike's death, 1988, was when Steve Hollinsworth conducted his interviews with Fritz, Doris, Kevin, and Carrie for his article that I talked about earlier, The Fall of the House of Von Erich, that was published in D magazine. So all those quotes I was talking about, when he asked Fritz, do you ever think you're too hard on your sons? That's after these deaths. That's after these deaths that he was like, oh, hell no. One time Carrie told me I would, he didn't deserve a beating and I just beat him harder or something.
After one of your children commits suicide because he literally said in his note, I'm sorry, this was too much for me. But you don't think that you were too hard on your kids. Well, he said in the note,
he said, I'm in a better place. I'll be watching.
But
But I get it. You're reading between the lines.
Yeah,
you're reading between the lines.
Fucking recognize that your kid is suffering and that's so sad.
Yeah. Now
I like him less as the story progresses.
Same. Hello to all of our jury members listening to the pod. This is Kelsey here with a brief interruption. Now, if you are enjoying today's episode, I want you to keep in mind that we are a fully independent podcast, meaning that all of the research, the writing, the editing, the promotion on social media and marketing, all of these things are done by Emily and myself. So we hope that if you guys are really enjoying the podcast, you'll take a little bit of action to help support us. So there's a couple ways you can do this. The most important thing that you can do for us is to make sure that wherever you are listening to this podcast, make sure you are following us / subscribe to us, whatever they call it. Make sure you are following us. Another way that you can help support us is to rate and review the podcast. So on Spotify, you can give us a 5-star rating. You can't write a review, but you can write a review on Apple Podcasts. So that is super helpful, just so everyone else knows that you're enjoying it. Now, the third thing that is super, super helpful, tell your friends about us. Tell your friends and family, anyone that you know who likes true crime, either just tell them verbally about us, send them your favorite episode, whatever it may be. Just help us get the word out. That's one of the easiest things that you can do without putting a ton of work into it. So we appreciate you guys listening. Thank you for being here. We really do love doing this, and we appreciate all of your support. So let's get back to the story. During these interviews, Hollinsworth asked why Mike ever got back in the ring after his toxic shock syndrome and why they let him get back in the ring. Doris told Hollinsworth, quote, "He wanted to more than anything. That's all he would tell us he wanted," end quote. To which Fritz added, quote, "Good Lord, how could I ever tell him that he couldn't go back in the ring, that his body wasn't right? How could I?" End quote. Doris continued, quote, sorry, I feel like saying quote unquote every time is so fucking annoying, but I think I have to, or I'm going to get like sued. So sorry. Doris continued, quote, "How can I tell my youngest, Chris, that his asthma might keep him out of wrestling? Every day he lifts weights. He dreams about being like his brothers. Do I dare go out there and break his heart?" End quote. Like, so she's just comparing, like, they want to do what's best for the family and like they're crushed if they can't and whatever. Yeah. But I don't know.
I could disagree with.
I don't know how you feel about it.
But I also don't have kids, so I don't
feel good about it.
Yeah.
I don't feel good about it.
I don't feel great.
So what's interesting is, like, at the time of this interview, obviously, like, the interviewer, Steve Hollinsworth, he knows that they've lost 3 of their 6 sons. He knows that Jack Jr., David, and Mike have all passed away. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't know about Carrie's foot. And so it's really interesting. You should read this article. It is so good, guys. It's called The Fall. It's written so well. Like, I love it. And, but like, he's interviewing Carrie and he has no idea that like Carrie lost his foot. It's not, it's not mentioned in this. No one knows.
He gives like a good perspective of like everyone, everyone at the time, which now we know that he didn't have a foot when he was giving this interview, but he didn't know that. Yeah.
So during this interview, Fritz told Hollinsworth, quote, "The hell of it is that now people watch us to see what tragedy will happen next. I wish I could explain it, but I can't. We're better known now because we die." End quote. Isn't that...
another notch in the belt for reasons I don't fucking like him.
Yeah, isn't that, like, that is fucking heartbreaking, though. Like, to think everyone's just, like... Now they're not interested in the Von Erichs because of their, like, wrestling lore or anything. They're just like, oh, they're keep like, what's going to happen next?
Yeah, like, what else is going to happen? Like, that's fucked up.
And this is, like, people are already talking about, oh, the family's curse. Like, all these horrible things happen to them.
Seems like it.
Now, after Mike's death, Kevin and Carrie bought Fritz out of the business as the toll of getting older and the deaths of 3 children had just grown too much for Fritz on top of the mounting stress of like running a failing business. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the business, like we said, was pretty much underwater at this point. And to Fritz's dismay, Kevin and Carrie decided to sell World Class, though they continued their wrestling careers. So they sold the family business because they were losing money. They were in debt. They couldn't afford it anymore. So they really, everything. It was the right choice, but Fritz was very against it. So they still wrestled for like the WCCW and everything. They still continued their careers, but they no longer like owned WCCW. Mm-hmm. Now, according to the Dallas Observer, Kevin was actually banned from wrestling in Texas at this time due to a severe concussion that he had. But instead of resting and healing, he simply shipped off to Japan to wrestle there for a while.
I was literally going to be like, oh, well, thank God they fucking made him stop wrestling. Never mind.
Well, yeah, they're like, you're not allowed to wrestle. You like your concussion's too bad. Whatever, you can't wrestle here. Because there's liability issues.
Well, yeah,
there.
I'm sure they're like, we don't want you to fucking lose a head like your brother lost of. You can probably take that out. That doesn't make any sense. But like,
lose a head. I'm keeping it in. Just kidding. I'll take it out if you want. It's funny because I was
he's gonna be fighting without his head.
I was
he's
trying
gonna
to follow.
He's gonna be
I was
fighting
trying
with
to
a
follow.
prosthetic head.
I was trying to follow, and I was like trying to picture it in my mind, and it was full decapitation.
Yeah,
It
me
was where
too.
I went. Like just like someone just decapitates him during a wrestling match.
That's where my mind went when I was trying to explain it, but then I was like, that doesn't make any sense.
I know what you meant though. Like you don't want him to have like permanent brain damage or something.
No, I truly meant decapitated head. I'm like, they don't want him to lose a head.
Oh, well then for sure it's staying in. We're keeping this part in. That is so fucking funny. Thank God. Don't lose your head, guys.
I sound like an idiot.
Don't lose your head wrestling. Wrestling is so dangerous. Your head might fall off.
Not off with their heads.
So, yeah, like I said, of course, instead of wrestling and healing, he goes off to Japan so he can continue wrestling because he needs to help support the family. Like, they no longer have the WCCW. Now, as you could probably guess, Chris, who was the youngest Von Erich brother, he's like now an adult. So, of course, this is the perfect time to thrust him into the family business because
Poor Chris.
they need it. Now, luckily, unlike Mike, Chris loved wrestling. He loved the wrestling business. He wanted to be in it. He wanted to be like his brothers and had grown up idolizing them. And so
He's probably just so excited to start.
Right. So still, like, it's better because at least he's being pushed into it, probably, yes, but like he's happy about it. It's where he wants to be.
He's embracing it, yeah.
But he is like a little bit different from Kevin, Carrie, and David in that, he wasn't naturally gifted like them. He was more like Chris. Like he was
had to put in the
thinner,
work.
he was less athletic, like less muscular. And he actually he was the smallest of the Von Erich brothers. So he was 5'5" tall.
Oh shit.
And like I said, I believe David was the tallest. I believe he was 6'7". So like big difference between these guys. Big difference. So he was a small guy. He was 5'5", and he actually grew up with like very, very severe asthma his entire life, which they think is kind of part of the reason he was so small.
Yeah.
He took so for his asthma, he took a medication called prednisone, and this is a glucocorticoid. Hold on, I got it.
Big fucking word.
Prednisone is a glucocorticoid. I'm not saying that right.
I have no idea
I've seen
what
this in
word you're trying to say. I've heard of prednisone.
I think I just spelled it wrong. I'm going to say it how I spelled it, okay? So, sorry, guys. Glucocorticoids. It's not coid. Doesn't matter. Steroid. It's
Corticosteroid. Corticosteroid.
Okay. I think I just put an I where an I did not belong. But you guys are getting the gist, okay? I'm a doctor.
It's prednisone. I definitely have seen a commercial about it before.
So basically it's a steroid that's used to used to suppress the immune system and decrease inflammation, but it also affects the body's calcium levels. So this leads to like bone brittleness.
Yeah. That's why your parents tell you to drink milk. That's why my mom forced me to drink milk with every meal when I was a kid. It was not my favorite, and it was like fat-free milk, so it was not even the good milk. But
gross.
That's why I've only ever broken one bone.
You better knock on wood.
I know. I think this is fake wood.
That's fake wood. Emily's fucked. Emily's fucked. You just cursed yourself.
No, I say that all the time. I literally haven't broken a bone since I was like a year old.
Nice. All right.
Here he comes, I guess.
So basically this made his bones brittle. Like obviously I'm sure that makes it more difficult for the bones to grow.
Yeah.
And like, so Chris just had these like fragile bones that would break so easily just from simple wrestling moves. So it made it like so hard for him to like get in the ring and do what everybody else was doing. But of course, like any of the Von Erichs, he was in that ring anyway.
That probably scared the shit out of everyone else. They're like, this kid's the most brittle of them all, and you bring in him in here and he breaks like a finger, and they're like, oh.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to hurt. You don't want to hurt the other people like that, I would assume.
But especially since it's a Von Erich brother, you know?
Yeah. Now, after Mike's suicide, Chris had become extremely depressed because, like, Mike and Chris were very close. Like, they were, I think, I kind of look at it as, like, two arrows of the Von Erich brothers. There's
like the older
Kevin,
three.
David, Carrie, and then like Michael and Chris, who were just like closer, knew each other better. Like they were kind of, you know, best friends. I don't know if they were literally best friends, but like out of the brothers, they were the best friends. Yeah. And so Chris just became extremely depressed. Sad. And like his brothers, he began using drugs as well to cope with his depression. So at this point, both Chris and Carrie are suffering from severe addictions to cocaine and kind of like anything else they can get their hands on. But like cocaine was a big theme. Now, in 1991, Chris broke his elbow in a match in Dallas, and the injury seemed to like heal especially slow. So later that month, Chris came to Kevin's home like in the middle of the night because at this point, like he's got this broken elbow. He's not really supposed to be wrestling. He's like, this is what he wants to do, but it's very obvious that like he's not a great wrestler and he shouldn't be in the ring. He's not doing as well. And this was, again, he dreamed of this growing up. And so he's in this depression. And he comes to Kevin's home in the middle of the night to tell Kevin that he wanted the VCR that he had loaned him back. Like just came to his house in the middle of the night. Like, hey, that VCR I loaned you, I need it back. So Kevin like found this behavior troubling. So the next day he goes to check on Chris at the parents' home. So
Chris still lived with his parents?
That's what I think.
Okay.
I'm not 100. I didn't read that, but like I know that Chris was at their house, and this is where Kevin went to check on him. So Kevin found Chris sitting on top of like a hill outside, like at the family's ranch. So Kevin went and sat with him, and Chris admitted to Kevin that he had been self-harming since he had broken his arm. So Kevin talked to him for a while, and
should probably put another trigger warning in here too.
Yeah, I'll put one at the top that's like we're going to talk about depression and suicide and self-harm.
Okay.
So Kevin talked with him for a while, and the conversation like ended with Chris reassuring Kevin that he wasn't going to self-harm anymore, and like I think Kevin kind of felt like he had talked him through this, and he's trying to like help guide his little brother.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not exactly sure what transpired directly after this conversation, but it seems that Kevin and Doris had left the home at some point, because I read that when they returned later that evening on September 12th, Kevin found Chris about 100 yards away from Fritz and Doris's home with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head from a 9mm pistol.
Oh my God.
But at first, Kevin didn't realize what it was. He later told Texas Monthly Magazine, quote, "I thought, oh man, he's taken a bunch of pills or something. So I put my hand behind him to lift him up and said, come on, Chris, stand up, walk around. My thumb went into his head.
Oh.
You could have put a coffee cup in that hole. There was no doubt. That's where I got the joke I tell, that the last thing that crossed Chris's mind before he died was my thumb. I know that sounds horrible. I'm sure I sound like a nutty guy right now. But I guarantee you that at one time, there were 5 more just like me. That's the way we deal with grief. It keeps you from being a victim." End quote.
Oh my God.
Isn't that
That gave me chills.
horrible?
Yeah, that's fucking awful.
So
After you think you just got done talking to your brother out of not even, like, he probably didn't even give any signs of, like, maybe doing it again that day, because he's like, oh, like, we talked about it, he's fine, he'll never do it again. Like, oh, God, that's so sad.
And I've like listened to a bunch of interviews with Kevin, and he's so lovable. He has this like big, thick Texas accent, and he's just like he just sounds like the most lovable family guy ever. And
Makes me sad.
You just can't imagine the level of tragedy. This is his fourth brother that has died.
God.
And to find his body. Now, when he found Chris was actually still alive. So he was rushed to the hospital, but just 20 minutes.
His thumb is really the last thing that touched his brain.
And this is what we talk about with like gallows humor, and that's why like exactly what Kevin is saying is how I feel about like comedy. Like comedy
kind of
is
have
what,
to add like the comic relief. Yeah.
Yeah, it's needed to deal with hard things in life. When something is so horrible, it feels like inescapable. The only thing you can do is laugh at it. And that's just my personal opinion. And that's why like we tell a lot of horrible stories, and like that's why we laugh at times through them, is because you have to. Otherwise it's just horrible. And that's like kind of what Kevin's saying. He's like, I tell this joke that like the last thing that crossed his mind was my thumb. Because it's fucking funny. Yeah. That is so fucking funny.
I know. When you were saying that, I was like, I don't want to laugh, but that's pretty funny.
That is horrible. It's horrible, but it's so funny. And that's what he's saying. He's like, that's the only way we can deal with this level of grief. Because otherwise we're the victims and our life is horrible. And our, like, otherwise, like, and I'm putting words in his mouth now, but I'm just trying to tell you how I think about it. Is like, at that point, dealing with that level of grief is like, either you let it destroy you, or you find a way to move past it. That's it.
I mean, yeah, and Chris obviously could not let it, like, he couldn't move past it.
Yeah. And anyway, so he was rushed to the hospital and he was declared dead 20 minutes after arriving. Oh. He was only 21 years old.
Oh my God, that's so sad.
Yeah. Now, next to where they had found him was a suicide note, but its contents have never been released to the public. Toxicology reports showed both cocaine and Valium in his system at the time of his death. Now, with the death of Chris, Kevin and Carrie were now the only living Von Erich brothers remaining. While Jack Jr. had passed in 1959, 3 of the 4 deceased brothers had all died within a 7-year period. David in 1984, Mike in 87, and Chris in 91. So I'm sure you can imagine this took a toll on the entire family. And less than a year after Chris's death, Fritz and Doris divorced in July of 1992. Arguably most affected by the death of Chris was Carrie, who had already been spiraling deeper and deeper into depression and addiction for years before, Chris passed away. Carrie was in constant physical pain due to his amputation. He relied on prescription drugs and Novocaine injections to numb himself enough to get through matches. But his career was flailing despite all of this. He entered rehab a few times, but it was never successful. At this point, his wife had left him and taken the kids. He was in trouble with the IRS, had lost his house, and was often so strung out that he could barely speak. Then, in September of 1992, Carrie was sentenced to 10 years probation for forging prescriptions. Just months later, in January of 1993, he was arrested for possession of cocaine. He was released on bond, but this was a clear violation of his probation. And it was possible, and again, like, this is just months after he was sentenced to, so September of 92, he was sentenced to probation. January of 93 is when he was arrested for the cocaine, just months later. Like, so it was possible that he was going to be sent to prison for violating his probation. So he had to go, basically, they had scheduled a probation violation hearing for February 18th, and he knew he had to go to this, and he thought he was going to get sent to prison. Now, on the morning of the 18th, the day of the scheduled hearing, Carrie reportedly called Kevin and said that he wanted to kill himself. But Kevin, talked to him on the phone, and he thought he had talked him through it. Carrie then met his ex-wife, Kathy, for lunch, whom he had also told he planned to commit suicide. He even gave her a list of people he wanted to be pallbearers at his funeral. Still, she didn't believe him. Because apparently,
Dude, when people tell you they're going to kill themselves, fucking believe them the first time.
Yeah. So here's the thing, though, is Carrie had apparently he threatened to commit suicide often throughout their marriage. Like when they would get in fights and like she was saying she was going to leave and stuff, like Carrie would threaten to commit suicide
Okay,
if
well,
she
that's
did that.
fucked up. Yeah.
And she said that like she did. There were times when like she got the guns out of the house and stuff. So
Yeah,
like, to
so
me
she
that
believed him, yeah.
that shows that she thought he was somewhat serious or at least was being cautious. But I do think like she just at this point was thinking like this is like a cry for attention.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, though, if someone is down so bad that the way they're trying to cry for attention is by telling you they're going to commit suicide, even if they're not actually going to commit suicide, something is extremely wrong and it needs to be taken very seriously because maybe they're not going to do it today, but they, something is wrong and they need help.
That's sad.
Nothing
against her too. Like when I was like,
no,
fucking believe them. Like, I'm sure that's she probably was just like, oh yeah, he's just saying this again, and it's not going to happen.
Right? No, but you're right. But you're right. It's like, it's the little boy who cried wolf type of thing.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate for you because it's hard to deal with, but you have to take it seriously every time.
Yeah.
And I don't blame her for not, because I can understand why she didn't. But I just think it's like, again, when we tell these horrible, sad stories, it's like, okay, what can we learn from it? I think that's one of the things we can learn from this story. Now, Carrie left the restaurant before Kathy, and after his departure, Kathy noticed that he had written something on the tablecloth. It read, "Tonight I walk with my brothers." From the restaurant, Carrie headed straight over to Fritz's ranch. He and Fritz chatted for a bit, and at some point, unbeknownst to Fritz, Carrie grabbed a .44 caliber revolver that Fritz had gifted him 2 Christmases earlier. Before leaving, Carrie allegedly told his father, quote, "I really love you, Dad. I just want to go out and drive for a while. I need to be alone to think about some things," end quote. When he didn't return after about 45 minutes, Fritz and a family friend drove around looking for him. They found Carrie on the property, slumped against a tree, dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the heart. He was 33 years old.
Oh, jeez.
Toxicology reports showed that he was over the legal drinking limit and also had cocaine in his system at the time of his death. By February 19th, 1993, Kevin Von Erich was the only Von Erich child still alive. All 5 of his brothers, Jack Jr., David, Mike, Chris, and Carrie, were dead. 3 died by suicide.
Dude, how do you live a happy life after that? After every single one of your siblings? And I mean, that's a lot of siblings, like to have 5 siblings and they're all dead.
I can't imagine, but.
And 3 of them from suicide. That's so sad.
I can't imagine. And we're going to talk about, there's a little bit more like timeline I want to go over, but I want to get deeper into 3 suicides in one family. And so just 4 years after Carrie's death, Fritz actually died from a stroke. He had been having health issues. I mean, he's old at this point. He was born, I believe, in 1929, and it's 1997 now. So he passed away. I think a stroke was the final thing for him. In 2005, Doris and Kevin, the only remaining members of the family, were interviewed by Texas Monthly Magazine. And this is the same article that I've been referencing kind of throughout the story.
Yeah.
So of his brothers, Kevin told reporter John Spong the following. Now, these are all separate quotes about each brother, like that I took from the article. But I just want to tell you, like, get through them all at once of each different brother. But, like, again, these are separate conversations he's having with the reporter. He didn't just, like, list them all in one like I'm about to.
Yeah.
So of Mike, he said, quote, "Mike should have never been a wrestler. He should have been off somewhere playing his guitar. I loved Chris, but I wasn't around him that much. When I was, every word out of his mouth was a put down of other people and of himself. So I spent a lot of time correcting him, trying to motivate him, and he made me out to look like Ward Cleaver. But somebody had to say 10 hup. Carrie wasn't addicted to any one drug. He liked drugs. It wasn't that he liked coke or ice or meth. He just liked that life of parties and drugs. I don't remember being told anything when Jackie died, just that he was in heaven. It's almost like God protects children from grief. I'm sure I did plenty of playing that day, even though my brother was gone. It's not like losing brothers when you get older. With David, it was a really low kick. Terrible. To this day, I'm not over that. Every death after it was just, oh, this again. Losing David, that one kind of burned down the mission, end quote.
That's so sad.
Your
So he's
whole-
just like, oh, well, yeah, David was like one of the older. He was the oldest, wasn't he?
Yeah, no, it was Kevin was the oldest. And
But
then
David was the one that was like in the spotlight, and he kind of was like the leader of them because he was the he was very
it was Kevin, then
charismatic
David,
and-
and
yeah.
they like started their wrestling careers together.
Yeah.
So Now in 2015, Doris sadly passed away, but she was 82 years old and she died from natural causes, it seems.
Doris, my heart. This entire episode, I have literally just been thinking of Doris because how do you lose one child, let alone 5?
5 of your 6 children,
and
and
in the
3
way-
of them by suicide.
Yeah, in the way that she lost them too. Like that's fucking. I don't know. I hope she had a happy life because it doesn't sound like she did. Like that's so sad.
Yeah. Now, this all comes back to the curse of the Von Erich family. Was there a curse on them?
Dude, I fucking believe it.
Now, I'm going to tell you my opinion, and I want
It's
to
my
say
opinion!
this is my opinion, and there's even some evidence to the contrary to my opinion, but I'm going to say it anyway. My opinion is that the only curse on the Von Erich family was Fritz Von Erich himself.
I would have to agree.
I think
But
I
to play devil's advocate, I can't put myself in his position when he was saying like when the kids were like, "Oh, I would love like," when he's pretty much arguing with them or saying that, what am I supposed to do? Tell them not to go wrestle, that this is like the thing that they love. I can see, again, I don't have children, so I don't know, but I can also see where he was saying, like, how am I supposed to say that to them? Like, how am I supposed to, like, crush their dreams? Even though, in my opinion, I think it was his dream to begin with, but still, I can see why.
Yeah. So, like I said, there is some evidence contrary to this. And really what I mean by that is, so listened to an interview on a podcast that's by another wrestler, I think, named Jericho. I think the podcast was called Talk is Jericho. And he interviews Kevin Von Erich, who now has 2 sons who are Von Erich wrestlers.
Oh, shit.
And, he asks him about his dad. And after hearing this whole story, because this was kind of like the last piece that I consumed in my research.
Yeah, that's super
I was
interesting.
expecting him to be like, my dad was a tyrant and he was horrible to us and whatever. And he said, basically, he was like, and this is not verbatim, this is not a quote, this is going off my memory. He's like, I loved my dad more than anyone, and so did my brothers. My brothers loved him, and they put a lot of pressure on themselves. They wanted to be successful. They wanted to, follow in my dad's footsteps. They wanted to do a good job. They wanted our dad to be proud, but like, they did those things because they wanted to. And like my dad was like one of the best people, all praise and saying like, I loved him more than anything and blah, 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 blah. And I'm sure that's all true. And like, I guess what I said before was a little harsh. I don't know that, like, I don't think he's like purely responsible for these deaths, and not even like the ones that we kind of talked about maybe could have been avoidable. I think he played a part in it that could have been avoided.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I don't think that he was a bad person. I'm sure, coming from his son, I'm sure he probably was a great dad, Like, he didn't seem like he didn't love his kids. Like, he seemed like he was a great dad. He loved his kids. I think what I had a problem with was that he put so much pressure on his kids to fulfill his dream to the point of where they were loving, like they also loved it and they didn't want to let him down. And I think they saw that as like, oh, like this is just bonding. Like we're doing this with my dad. Like this was always what he wanted to do. This is like always what he wanted for us. And they probably saw that as like, you know, I'm living up to this awesome legacy that I've always wanted. And it's just like my whole family is this way. And I don't know.
I think you're right. I think you're right. So like, yeah, it was harsh. I guess what I should have said is after I read this whole story, that's what I thought is I'm like, Fritz is the curse.
Yeah.
What the hell? Fritz is the curse.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people say that. And then I heard that interview with Kevin and I'm like, well, this is Kevin's life. This is his family and his life. And I think I do think like, if it really were the case that it was like Fritz was such a dictator that he forced them to do these things that like made them so miserable and whatever, that Kevin would feel differently about his father. He wouldn't be praising him. So I think it's all convoluted. But I think there are things that Fritz did, and no parent is perfect. And I don't fucking have kids, so I shouldn't be giving parenting advice. But I do think like there are things that Fritz taught his children that were unhealthy behaviors, unhealthy, like coping, unhealthy, like, you know, they didn't seem like the most emotional, you know, I think there's a lot of issues. But really what Kevin says is that he thinks the curse on his family is mental illness.
Yeah, I think I might change my answer. I think that might be part of it. I think that mental illness probably ran in their family and it was just like a recipe for all of these tragedies.
I agree for sure. And that's where I think it's like the wrestling and the pressure and whatever, when you're already struggling with mental illness, really could exacerbate it.
Yeah. And especially in such a masculine family, like it's, I mean, it's just known that men are not super open with like, that's not a masculine thing to do, is express your emotions or talk about your mental health. That's just like not, I feel like that's how it was back then, you know? Now I feel like it's finally coming to light and people are talking more about mental illness and mental health. So I feel like it's a lot more standardized now, I guess, to talk about it. But back then you have to think like, especially in a family full of men, you know, like that's probably not something that they regularly talked about.
And that's what Kevin mentions it in the interview too. He's like, look, it's not like today where you have all of this like information out there.
Yeah.
Like there was no internet. People didn't talk about mental illness. Like people didn't talk about depression and all these different issues. And so it was one of those things where like when someone you love is struggling with it, like you didn't really know what to do.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I just, the way I look at it and like, I could just see where putting so much pressure on them to the point, and I don't think it was just him. Like I do think part of the major issue was the amount of pressure they put on themselves.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But that's how they were raised, you know, like,
but it's a product of how they were raised. And so like, okay, I shouldn't say Fritz was the curse, but I think that I would raise my kids differently. That's just me. Yep. Some other people might disagree with that. And I do think like, obviously mental illness is like a major issue. And I think that like with more resources, this could have been avoided today. And one thing I want to talk about is, so Kevin is the only remaining family member. He's still alive today.
He's gotta be old, man. How old is he?
Still married to Pamela.
Oh.
Still married. They have 4 children. Strong. The 2 boys are wrestlers.
Oh.
And
he's living out the family legacy.
They live in Hawaii and just living the life.
Dude, what a way to turn it around.
He's, from all accounts, from his own accounts, he's happy. He's had a happy life. And he talks a lot about how he misses his brothers and he loves them and, you know, about all the tragedy in his life, but he's lived a happy life. And I think, like, that really shows us, like, you know, if you're struggling with mental health or like suicidal thoughts or anything like that, is like you
It can get better.
can get
like,
through it
yeah.
and it can get better and you can live a happy life overall. Like no matter how like dark it gets, is like you can change things and live a happy life, but you can't do it alone. You have to ask for help. So I think that like, you know, Kevin had his family, you know, and his wife and his kids. And I think that, you know, probably has really helped get him through it. But if you don't have that, you have to ask for help elsewhere. So I know everyone who is listening right now when we release this is probably mostly people we know and whatever. And it seems like a little bit like dramatic for me to be like this. But like if anyone listening is struggling with this, like ask for help. Ask your family, ask your friends. If you feel like you don't have any family or friends to ask, call a suicide hotline. Ask them for resources on how to help.
They're all free. You don't have to pay for it. You're not going to get billed for calling a suicide hotline. Like, they're there to help you. They are there to be your friend when nobody else will.
Because it's like you look at Kevin's life and like he moved to Hawaii and he has his family and his children that he loves and he's done all of these amazing things. And while the average person isn't going to move to Hawaii and like have famous wrestling sons and all of that, like that's not what matters to Kevin. What matters is like his family and his kids, and he's experienced all these amazing things that like his brothers will never get to experience.
Yeah. Even the way he talks about it, like, yes, he was like joking about it a little bit, but like that's just kind of, I feel like that kind of gives you a glimpse into how he is as a person. Like he doesn't dwell on the shitty things that happen in life. He kind of makes light of them and is like, well, I had all of these awesome brothers and like they did all these cool things and I had this great dad, and like he doesn't sound like a negative person. I didn't want to like listen to the interview because it sounds pretty interesting.
It is really interesting, and it's with him and his sons. They're all being interviewed, so they do talk a lot about like current times. It's not. It's really the focus of the interview isn't on his family, but of course, like I think any interview with them, it's going to be asked about.
Yeah,
and I think it was that same interview that the guy kind of asks him like, does it make you sad to talk about like when people ask about your brothers? And he says, no, like I know people are scared to ask, but he's like, I like remembering them and I like talking about them, and it like brings me joy.
Yeah.
So you've led me to a good point for my final quote, because it goes right along with what you're saying. So in that Texas Monthly magazine article, Kevin said, quote, I wouldn't want anyone to feel sorry for me. What am I doing today? I watch Ross, which is his son, play football. My kids call and tell me they love me. My investments do well. I have a good life, and I'm planning on having a lot more. When people say, how do you do it? The answer is pretty simple, really. If you don't have any choice, then it's easy to deal with. What else are you going to do? Just drop dead and sink into the ground like rain? End quote. And so, like, I think that shows you, like, there's this book that I read called The Growth Mindset. I'm 99% sure. I'm gonna link to this book in the show notes because everyone should read this book. It will change your life. There's a book called The Growth Mindset where I think she's I don't know, don't quote me. It was years ago. I think she's like a psychologist or psychiatrist or something. And she talks about the growth mindset versus the victim mindset. And I think,
dude, I remember you telling me about this book.
Dude, this book, it changed my life.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about it.
Changed my life because it changed how I looked at my own life and like my role in like being happy or not. I think a lot of times it's easy to like wait for external factors to make you happy. And this book is about like, really, when you're doing that, that's like the victim mindset. Is like everything happens to you. And it's all about changing your perspective to have a growth mindset where like it can be anything. It could be like school or your career or learning a new thing or parenting or whatever. It's like maybe where you are now is not a good place, but you can always grow and you can always get to a good place, but you have to put in a lot of hard work. And I think that's what Kevin's saying is like, yeah, you could just drop dead from all of this tragedy and sink into the ground like rain. You have two options. You can do that, or you grow and you heal and you put in I'm not saying it's easy, but you have to put in very hard work to make your life a good life. And that's what Kevin has done. So I feel like I love this family. Like, it's so sad what happened to them, but but
the way that they, especially Kevin, I feel like.
I love Kevin.
Yeah.
It's like, you have to be such a strong person to be able to do.
That's exactly where I'm at.
But what I want to like make clear is that like, there's nothing about Kevin or like his other brothers. Kevin was raised the same way as all of his brothers were. There's nothing special about Kevin that made him able to survive and deal with all of this tragedy. It's not, oh, well, he's a strong person and his brothers weren't. I think what it is that Kevin made the decision that, and I think part of it was he had a family and stuff.
Yeah, he had a choice.
He chose. He's not a strong person just by nature. I mean, maybe physically, yeah, because whatever. But like, you know what I mean? Like, mentally, he's not a strong person just by nature. He was raised the same way as his brothers who dealt with a lot of mental health issues. But he's a strong person because he decided that he was going to be, and he was going to get through it and survive it and put in a lot of hard work to get there.
And look where he's at. He's happy after all of that. Like, not a lot of people, I mean, I don't know a lot of people that this has happened to, but I'm sure that there's a lot of people that have had worse happen to them and they couldn't choose to do this. They couldn't choose to be happy, you know?
Yeah, but I think that if you do choose, it's not easy. It will be a lot of hard work and there's ups and downs and it's very difficult, but it's always worth it to persevere, and it gets better. So anyway, that's my TED Talk on mental health.
It gets better.
It gets better. It gets better. Okay. And that is the story of the...
Dude, this was not what I was expecting. I was like, this is going to be such a lighthearted story. I'm like, ooh, this sounds cool. Like a wrestling family. Like, nice. And then I'm like, damn, I want to cry.
Isn't that...
Literally, I want to cry.
It's just insane.
So
like,
sad.
Yeah, it is so sad. And like...
But like, I'm so happy for Kevin and his family. Like, obviously, that just like makes me happy for him. But like, again, for Doris, I feel so bad for her and Fritz, even though he put so much pressure on his kids. But like, that was a good one.
So if you are struggling with suicidal thoughts or ideation, you can call 988. Just like you would call 911 for any other emergency, 988 is the national like suicide and crisis lifeline. So just dial 988, super easy to remember. So if you're struggling and you need some help, please call. You can be like Kevin. It can get better. So you can also text 988 or like chat with them too if you don't want to talk with someone on the phone. So.
And that's it.
And that's it.
That's all, folks.
That's all, folks.
Check out the movie. Check out the interview. Check out the book.
Check out the articles I mentioned. They're all so good. They're so good, especially the ones where they were...
I'm literally about to go home and watch this movie.
Dude, the movie... Oh, I forgot to mention this. The movie is so fucking sad. But you know how in the beginning when I said, like, oh, the movie is so tragic and then the real story is even more tragic? Well... In the movie, there's only 5 brothers. They combine Michael and Chris.
Did they not?
Into one character because they had to cut it for time. The movie was too long. And so, like, Michael and Chris are one character. So, like, in the movie,
they keep Jack in it? They keep Jack?
Well, yeah, because he just dies, like, in the beginning of the movie, just briefly. But, like...
Oh, I feel like that sucks for... Like,
I know, isn't that... Yeah. But only 4... die, and you're just like, how could 4 out of 5 die?
Yeah, and then you realize
and then you read the story and you're like, oh my god, it's 5 out of 6. Yeah, it's crazy, but you have to watch the movie. It's amazing. Zac Efron and everyone in it, all of the
I was
actors are
gonna say
incredible.
those two top ones.
They're amazing.
They're fun to look at.
Oh my god, it's so good. But okay, that's it for today. Go if you have siblings, go hug them super awkwardly because you're probably like, this is weird. We
Tell
never
them you
hug.
love them.
All right, bye.
Bye.